Chapter 161. Since you're Luna's friend, you're naturally my friend as well. The black dragon's scarlet eyes stared at the chimera. Mr. Magus Hill, you're currently heavily injured. You need to rest and recuperate. As for leaving, you should consider it after you've fully recovered. Hearing this, the chimera hurriedly stood up. As its right forelimb could not touch the ground, its body was slightly slanted. It hurriedly declined. Thank you, but I don't think there's a need. It did not want to stay in Blackwing's nest. This was a territory ruled by the powerful black dragon. Who knew what would happen? The chimera only wanted to return to the elven forest immediately. Why not? The green plains are filled with danger. I'm very worried about your safety. Without waiting for the chimera to decline, Caesar interrupted it and called out at the same time, "Husky." The sound of flapping wings could be heard as it rapidly approached from afar. The dragonkin leader led 6 wyverns to land and respectfully prostrate. Send Mr. Magus Hill to the treetop fortress. Let the chimera rest for a period of time and recuperate, Caesar said. Understood, your majesty. The wyverns lowered their heads and replied in a sharp, ear-piercing voice. I don't. Before Magus Hill could decline, red lines spread out from the black dragon lord's body. It spread its wings and left with the little fellow without hesitation. Seeing this, the chimera could not help but let out a low growl. Even if it was in the good faction, as a weapon of war, this fellow would still be enraged. Previously, when the black dragon lord had broken its bones and stepped on it, even if it did not hate it, Magus Hill still had a lot of resentment. It was just that he did not show it, wanting to compromise and return to the elven forest first. But now, the black dragon overlord was so overbearing that it was infuriating. He didn't even give him a chance to choose. Magus Hill wasn't stupid. He knew that the black dragon overlord wasn't trying to let him rest and recuperate, but was trying to imprison him. It wanted to resist and escape, but looking at the 7 wyverns that had already surrounded it, one of which was about the same size as itself, the chimera gave up on this idea. Without Miss Luna's sight, who knew what the black dragon's subordinates would do to it? Magus Hill did not want to suffer a second injury. For now, it could only endure the humiliation and think of a way to escape after it recovered. The chimera planned to do so. On the other side, the black dragon brought the little fellow back to the Emerald Palace. Caesar, do you really intend to let Mr. Magus Hill go after it recovers? Luna raised her head and asked him. Although she had stayed by the black dragon lord's side for so long and was used to seeing bloodshed, the little fellow still retained the most basic kindness in her heart. Moreover, Magus Hill was not an enemy to her, but a friend. Furthermore, he was a member of the guardian team that protected the entire fairy race. Luna could not help but worry about the chimera's safety. Oh, Caesar paused for a moment and looked at the little fellow who was looking up at him expectantly. His expression was a little unnatural, but he still said to her, "Of course. You're the best." Luna smiled happily. As usual, she hugged his neck and pressed her face against the black dragon's scales. That's right. Caesar's scarlet eyes flashed. He did not continue this topic and instead asked, "Can you tell me about the Elven Forest? That's your home. There should be enough to talk about." He had originally planned to take action against the Elven Forest after dealing with the northern countries, but the chimera's sudden appearance forced Caesar to adjust his plans. He had a premonition that Blackwing's nest was going to make contact with the Elven Forest earlier than expected. Since that was the case, the Black Dragon Lord had to first understand more about that area. The Elven Forest, he heard little Luna say in a light tone. That's the home of many kind creatures in the north. I've told you about it before. It's a pity that you're an evil dragon and will be attacked and expelled there. Otherwise, I could bring you in to take a look. Caesar, do you know? There are lotus pods as big as houses there. There are dandelions as big as trees everywhere. There are also flower buds for fairies to sleep in. It's much more comfortable than your thorns." As she spoke, Luna slowly became excited. She circled around the black dragon, dancing up and down as she spoke. Yeah, of course, this was not what he wanted. But seeing how happy Luna was, Caesar remained gentle and patient as he listened to her. He only asked at the end, The elven forest has a beautiful environment and abundant resources. Want to attract the attention of others? Are there no enemies in the elven forest? Of course there are. Luna said, there have been many wars in history to protect their homeland. There have also been many human adventurers with ill intentions who have tried to sneak in and capture fairies, unicorns, and other relatively weaker races. The reason why my father said that we must call Chimera Magusher Lord is because it's a member of the Guardians. They are the true guardians of the elven forest. They shelter us from the wind and rain and fight against all evil creatures who want to invade the elven forest. It's because they are willing to shed blood that they keep all unstable factors and threats outside. That's why the fairies and other weaker races can live in peace and seclusion in the elven forest. As she spoke, Luna was moved by her own words. Tears welled up in her eyes, and Caesar could feel her heartfelt respect. That's indeed worthy of respect, Black Dragon said, comforting the little one. He then asked, but the elven forest is so big. Can the Guardians protect the entire forest? Will be hard. How many of them are there? They should be able to protect it. Luna sniffled and began to count with her fingers. Elven rangers, chimeras, giant eagles, centaurs, and tree shepherds. I heard that there are also metal dragons in the depths of the forest. It's just that dragons are a legend in our place. Very few forest fairies have seen real dragons. We also haven't sensed the presence of metal dragons in the elven forest. I'm guessing that the ruler of the elven forest must be a kind elder. Have you seen him? Oh, maybe the elven forest doesn't have a ruler. I mean, the leader of the Guardians. Luna, this silly child, was completely unguarded against Caesar. She didn't think of him as a cruel and violent Penishade dragon at all. So as long as the little one knew, Luna told him everything. Thus, Caesar knew that the leader of the elven forest military force was a long-lived species. The elven king, named Garcia Whisperwind. Although he hadn't stepped into the ranks of legends, he was a divine chosen favored by the moon god Serene. A divine elven king, even if he wasn't as powerful as the old green dragon, was probably not much weaker. Chapter 162. It was necessary to get information on his neighbors, but Caesar still needed to think carefully about the final plan to contact the elven forest. Judging from the current situation, he really needed to take that place under his command. Firstly, the elven forest was rich in resources, and there were still mineral veins left. That was very attractive to Caesar. Mining the mineral veins could provide a continuous supply of metal for smelting and the energy consumed by the Black Dragon Lord's Crimson Heart. Secondly, considering his plan to make money by selling cards in the future, he really needed a group of kind races to help him endorse the cards. Because of his desire for wealth, Caesar had already put the plan of making cards in Iradia on the agenda a few days ago. When the time came, the final card would have two emblems drawn on the back. One would be the Blackwing's nest, and the other would be the Elven Forest or some other famous and kind faction. This way, its target audience would cover all races, preventing the kind races from sweeping it into the trash when they saw that it was something created by an evil dragon. There was a hidden danger. Of course, Caesar still had to sign his name at the end of the card. He needed reputation to complete the achievement and obtain the trophy, but he did not want to create any big incident that would shock Iradia and attract a crusade. He could only rely on selling cards to maintain the spread of his reputation. This might seem a little out of place, but it was actually the most important part of the Black Dragon Overlord's plan. In his previous life, there was a saying on Earth that said, the sum of money earned by all the robbers in the world can't even compare to the annual income of a single monopoly. The Stone Crow clan, under the guidance of Caesar, had amassed a fortune that the orcs would never be able to touch in their entire lives. The Stone Crow clan had amassed a fortune that they would never be able to touch in their entire lives. However, the summer grass was already rampant. There were high-level mages among the humans who broke down every element and finally found the composition of the summer grass. After that, the news spread. Now, the entire human world and even other races had a large number of manufacturers selling the summer grass beverage. Therefore, Caesar had to do something about the sales of the cards. He could not waste such a good idea. The reason why the Black Dragon Lord wanted to rule the countries in the north, and even the Elven Forest, was to pave the way for the promotion of the cards. After a simple analysis of the information about the Elven Forest, Caesar judged that it would not be a big problem if he really wanted to conquer that place. Unlike the past, he was no longer the weak and powerless young dragon from 7 years ago, and he did not only have the lonely Stone Crow clan as his subordinates. He was now powerful and had many subordinates. The Black Dragon Lord could totally carry out the horrifying strategy of either surrendering or dying. He could slaughter his way through the forest of elves and use the most violent and cruel method to complete his bloody rule. However, the Elven Forest was Luna's home. It could be seen that the little one cared a lot about that place. She was born and raised there. According to Luna, her parents and ancestors all lived there. They had a long history. If Caesar used violent methods to burn the Elven Forest to ruins, it was hard to imagine how sad Luna would be. She might even break down. Caesar did not want her to be sad. He did not have any big dreams. It was fine as long as he lived a good life. However, if he did that, even if his forces expanded and he obtained all the rewards he wanted, Caesar would not be able to live a good life because of the little one. If that was the case, damn it, forget it. It would be best if the leader of the Elven Forest, the Elven King, named Garcia Whisperwind, was willing to cooperate and form an alliance. However, if that guy was a stubborn old man who held on to the old-fashioned concept of camp or chose to isolate himself from the outside world, then the Black Dragon Lord would not have any better ideas. At most, he would not touch that place. Iradia was so big, and there was more than one famous camp in the north. For Luna, Caesar was willing to give in. Even if this piece of meat was right next to the mouth of Blackwing's nest and was within reach, Caesar could still choose to avoid it. As for Chimera Magusher, let it go. Go wherever you like. Hurry up and get lost. Don't waste food in Blackwing's nest. We can't afford to raise such a monster. Of course, if this guy dragged the troops of the Elven Forest to find trouble, then he really deserved a beating. Late at night, Luna had already curled up in the thorns on his back and fallen asleep. The Black Dragon Lord lay on the ground and thought for a long time before finally making a series of decisions. He had completed a change in mentality and completely thought it through. It was true that the expansion of forces, the collection of resources, and the acquisition of rewards were all important, but the reason why Caesar did all that was to live more comfortably and protect the things that he wanted to protect, instead of neglecting the essentials and becoming a slave in pursuit of those things, turning into an emotionless machine. After thinking about all this, Caesar's mood became much more relaxed. His eyes were no longer gloomy as before. He yawned and turned his neck 180 degrees to look at the little girl on his back. Then, he closed his eyes and slept peacefully. At dawn the next day, Caesar suddenly heard the cry of the wyvern. At first, he thought that the chimera had found a chance to escape. In the end, he realized that this was not the case. It was Hog who had returned. However, that guy did not come directly to the treetop fortress. He only sent 2 gnolls to report. This was because the gnoll leader had brought back a large group of whimpering gnomes. This guy was not bad. Although Caesar was a little annoyed from waiting these days, it was not easy to capture a large group of gnomes in just a month's time. Looking at it this way, Hog's efficiency was still quite guaranteed. With the little girl still sleeping soundly on his back, Caesar climbed out of the treetop fortress and began to fly to the edge of Blackwing's nest. Like now, without using extreme speed and maintaining a steady pace, the Black Dragon's Crimson Heart could provide him with flight for a very long time. Gnomes were also a very representative and lowly species. Not only were there many of them in Iradia, but they were also like locusts that covered many outer worlds. They were a very famous, dirty, chaotic, and detestable race. These guys were covered in a layer of disgusting green skin. They had large heads that were disproportionate to their bodies, sharp and thin ears, and a pair of strong feet with protruding bones. Most of the gnomes were lazy, cowardly, and greedy. Most importantly, these guys did not know what fear was. It was not that they were like the orcs and did not know fear. On the contrary, These guys were rather cowardly. They had no resistance against powerful creatures and could not wait to bury their heads in their pants. However, as long as those powerful creatures did not appear in their line of sight, these guys would forget the injuries and threats they had suffered before and return to their original nature. Therefore, if one wanted to order the gnomes to do things, one had to have a relative holding a butcher's knife and watching over them at all times. Not a second more or less could be missed. One had to be in their line of sight at all times for these guys to remain stable and obedient. Because of this, the other intelligent creatures in Iradia generally hated this race. They thought that they were scum that was even lower than the kobolds. Even the Penishade dragon's young would not think of ordering them around. They only planned to use these guys to make soup. Chapter 163. However, it would be too subjective and one-sided to say that the goblins had no merits and were all trash. Caesar was very interested in Iradia's culture and culture. He had a deep understanding of many species, even the lowly species that the intelligent species despised and abandoned, such as the kobolds, gnomes, and goblins, had a more comprehensive understanding of them. From the books he had read, the Black Dragon Lord understood that the goblins' creative spirit and alchemy talent were one of the best among the many species in Iradia. Although they were often unreliable, they could occasionally come up with many good things on a whim. For example, the giant puppet weapons that had shone brilliantly in the countless wars of the Second Epoch had been created by the goblins using the giant goblins as their prototype. Of course, as Eladia continued to develop, the original puppet weapons had long since been eliminated. They were replaced by even more powerful construct magic statues that were created using magic conducting power. Furthermore, these fellows' talent in engineering was not much weaker than that of the wild boar people. And in terms of forging, they were far ahead of all the clans under Blackwing's nest. It was under the influence of these factors that the great Commander Hogg had left Blackwing's nest with his legendary weapon, Bloodthirst, to search for and capture the goblins. The gnolls were stationed at the periphery of Blackwing's nest. They formed a circle with weapons in hand, sealing off the buzzing goblins. At a glance, there were about 200 to 300 goblins here, which was roughly equivalent to a small goblin community. At this moment, Caesar arrived. Accompanied by low rumbling thunder and surging crimson flames in the sky, the black dragon approached from afar, rapidly enlarging. Caesar still could not learn how to glide and slow down. He crashed into the ground with a boom, landing on a steep slope not far away. Accompanied by a loud crash, the ground beneath the black dragon's feet let out a hoarse wail. Cracks spreading out one after another, and a surge of sand and dust was swept up. The goblins were scared out of their wits by the sound of an explosion. They hugged the big green head with both hands, squatted down, and buried their heads in the crotch of their pants. Cries for mercy kept coming out of their mouths. In contrast, the jack-o'-lanterns were much calmer. They only lowered their heads in awe and did not do anything embarrassing. "Your Majesty." Hogg walked over and placed Bloodthirst on the ground. He knelt down on one knee and placed his right paw on the handle of the axe, saying, "This is the gnome tribe from the uninhabited lands in the north. There are gnomes, kobolds, and cave dwellers everywhere. However, the number of wolf pups I brought with me was limited, so I could only restrain this number of gnomes." Not only had the Jackallan leader completed his mission, but he had also brought back information about the unknown region in the north. "Well done." Black Dragon nodded and was not stingy with his encouragement. Hogg was indeed worthy of praise. At least until now, he had not disappointed him. "How many goblins are there here?" 273, but many died along the way. "I did not have time to count them, Your Majesty." That was enough. The main task of the goblins was to smelt metal and make weapons. As long as he could enslave them and prevent them from slacking off or running away, these few hundred would be enough to satisfy the current needs of Blackwing's nest. With the goblins in place, the mining plan was put on the agenda. There were mines in the Green Plains as well. A few miles behind Blackwing's nest treetop fortress, there was a black iron mine that had been discovered long ago. The Mother of Poisons had been mining it for a long time, But Sylvia did not have high-quality miners like the kobolds and gray dwarves, so the efficiency was low. Later on, due to the war and the change of power, mining came to a complete halt. And now, Caesar was preparing to restart the mining plan of the Black Iron Mine. No matter how rich the green capital's treasury was, without replenishment, it would face the predicament of sitting on nothing. Some time ago, the scattered kobolds that had been trembling at the edge of Blackwing's nest, wanting to seek shelter, could now be put to good use. Divide an independent area and settle these goblins down. Then transfer some people from the various clans to closely monitor the goblin community and force them to obey the orders of Blackwing's nest. Caesar said, "Also, after you return, rest for 2 days and make preparations. As usual, you will take over the management of Blackwing's nest. I am about to fall into a deep sleep. You will become the king of the north, your majesty." Hearing this, Hogg nodded and accepted the order, at the same time complimenting him. He knew that dragons grew and matured after a long period of hibernation. Every long period of hibernation would allow them to absorb the knowledge of the dragon's inheritance. When they woke up, they would become even more powerful. Unfortunately, this flattery was not on point. In Caesar's eyes, becoming the king of the north was not an impossible goal. If nothing unexpected happened, he only needed to crush the countries in the north and pull the elven forest to his side. Then, he would be able to easily obtain the title without the coronation. Although Hogg was intelligent enough and had experienced enough twists and turns, due to the factor of strength, becoming the king of the north was already the limit of the Knoll leader's imagination. With his empty mind, he could not think of a more powerful existence at the moment. The black dragon nodded. This damned fellow liked to hear people flatter him. As long as it was not the dry and awkward kind of flattery of the kobolds, the black dragon would accept any slightly more normal praise and would gladly enjoy it. Hogg's heartfelt flattery made him feel much better. He paused for a moment, then brought up another matter. When the time comes, if the orcs bring the Taurens back, arrange for the Taurens to farm. You can contact Kaki's shape-shifting monster leader and ask him directly for some necessary resources that Blackwing's nest does not have. Also, if Gaul still does not return after a month, wake me up at the Emerald Palace. I have to go look for them. Yes, your majesty. The Knoll leader, who was half kneeling on the ground, nodded and accepted the order. Hogg was already strong enough, but compared to the Black Dragon Lord, he was still far from it. Caesar's body had already grown to an exaggerated degree. In the history of Iradia, even the Red Dragon had not been as strong as him. This fellow's muscles were knotted and arched, resisting the armor and thorns of the exoskeleton, as if the scales on his skin were about to be torn apart. After everything was arranged, Caesar was not interested in watching the chaotic scene of the gnolls settling the goblins down. The Black Dragon Lord directly turned around and returned with the crimson flames. It was still early, so he could still go back to sleep or something. At this stage, he could not enter a long sleep, so he had to at least make up for it with a little rest. For dragons, sleeping for an entire day and night was really just a small nap. Chapter 164. After releasing Chimera Magusher and arranging everything properly, Caesar had wanted to seal the treetop fortress and hide in the green capital's treasure trove. Then, he would dig through all the shiny things and welcome the long-delayed slumber. However, a sudden small matter caused the Black Dragon Overlord to have no choice but to postpone this wish. The Brindle family, or rather the shapeshifters, in the Khaki territory at the Rhine border, had contacted their master and sent over something. It was said to be a treasure unearthed from Count Brindle's mansion. It was hidden in a secret room, and the shapeshifters had only just discovered it. They did not know what it was, but since it was hidden so well, it should belong to some treasure of Brindle's family. They did not dare to hide it from the Black Dragon Lord, and very honestly sent someone to deliver it. That's it. Caesar looked at the little thing in front of him and asked the shapeshifters who were responsible for delivering it. In that secret room, we only found this, your majesty. The shapeshifters said, I know, you may leave. Caesar waved his claws disappointedly, thinking that it was something good. After casually sending the shapeshifters away, The black dragon lord reluctantly perked up a little and looked at the small sculpture that looked like a handicraft. It was only about 10 centimeters tall, and compared to the huge black dragon lord, it was like a mosquito. Moreover, the carving was very crude, even inferior to the ancient orcs relief carvings in the underground passage of the abandoned city. It was simply unsightly. This thing was a depiction of a monster with a vague humanoid silhouette, but it had tentacles spread out from its chin like an octopus. Its body seemed to be covered in scales, and its hands and feet were long and thin, sharp claws. There was a pair of long and narrow wings on its back that were obviously unable to fly. Whether it was the material or the craftsmanship, this thing was extremely inferior, but there was a faint sense of vividness, as if accompanied by an innate, extremely cold viciousness. The monster in the sculpture was squatting on a stone slab covered with randomly drawn characters. It was indeed squatting, and its back was bent forward. The tips of its wings were pressed against the back of the stone slab, and its long, curled foreclaws extended over the four edges of the stone slab and held it upside down. The grotesque humanoid face was the most exquisite part of the whole sculpture. Its eyes were smiling, and it was very exaggerated. Tsk tisk. Caesar smacked his lips and looked at this little thing with interest. After coming to Iradia, he had seen too many deformed and ugly clans. Although this thing was a little strange, it was not to the point of shock to his soul. However, for some reason, he felt that this thing was somewhat familiar, as if he had seen it somewhere before. It was obviously created recently. The carvings were very new, and some of the corners were still sharp. Maybe it was something that one of Brindle's servants had nothing better to do and casually made, but for some reason, it was put in the secret room. In any case, there was one thing that was without doubt. This thing was very cheap. Dragons were born with an innate talent for valuing treasures, so Caesar could tell at a glance that this was not something expensive. It could not even be sold for a few copper coins. In that case, it had lost its value to Caesar. As for its historical origin and meaning, the black dragon did not want to delve into it. His energy was limited, and he did not have time to think about these things. The black dragon stretched out his claws and was ready to throw this thing away. It seemed that the shape-shifting monsters were getting more and more stupid. They dared to send anything to him without checking whether it was a treasure or not, and whether it had any collection value. It needed to be taught a lesson. Do you thirst for power? Just as Caesar's claws were about to touch the small sculpture, a misty whisper suddenly sounded in his ears. The tone was like the murmurs of people deep in their dreams, delirious ravings. It was very slow and very vague. What? Caesar froze for a moment and asked subconsciously. He looked around. The Emerald Palace was empty, and the only little one was sleeping in the small house in the Green Dragon's treasury. Hearing that Caesar was going to fall into a deep sleep in the Green Dragon's treasury, Luna had built a small house there first. In other words, there was no living thing nearby. Do you thirst for power? The low murmur sounded again. This time, Caesar did not answer. He leaned over and stared at the small sculpture that was sent over. He blinked, thought for a while, and then suddenly realized, are you Cthulhu or Cthulhu? He finally knew why he felt familiar. As a soul from another world, this sculpture model was very similar to the description of an evil god myth he had read in his previous life. The style was almost exactly the same, but because he had been in Iradia for too long, Caesar had forgotten a lot of things he had experienced on Earth. Now, after being reminded several times, he finally remembered. Do you thirst for power? It repeated for the third time. So, you're the instigator of that strange oath in Brindle's family? The Black Dragon Lord did not answer. He lay down, put his neck flat on the ground, and looked at the vicious and strange little sculpture. You are not an outer god, are you? Although you look decent, you actually need to take the initiative to hook up with other creatures. The legendary outer gods would not be so low level. Do you thirst for power? You don't even have the ability to connect. It seems like you have a hard time. Iradia's gods allow you to do this? Won't you be beaten? Are you a demon, a devil, or something else? Do you thirst for power? What method did you use to communicate with me? Will it attract the attention of the gods? Where's your real body? Do you eat meat, or are you a vegetarian? Do you want to wear clothes? Do you need to excrete? What is the position of excretion? The murmuring voice disappeared. The black dragon lay on the ground, his scarlet vertical eyes remaining indifferent as he stared at the little sculpture. After waiting for a long time and making sure that there was no more movement, he quietly breathed a sigh of relief. To be honest, when he guessed that the other party might be a life form like an outer god or an old god, he did feel fear. However, Caesar knew that fear wouldn't solve the problem. It would only make things worse. Since the other party had already come knocking on his door, he could only face it. Now that he seemed to have gotten rid of that thing, looking back, the shapeshifters discovered that it did not seem to be a coincidence. Although they did not betray him, they might have been influenced by their subconscious to do such a thing. Fortunately, the unknown thing was not that strong. Otherwise, it would not have just repeated an inexplicable sentence, and Caesar's mind would not have been able to remain rational. It should be something that invaded Iradia, a devil, or something like that. Caesar personally came to this conclusion after combining his experience and the information that was currently known. Of course, he did not want to think too deeply about it. This lazy dragon was not that curious. It would not investigate the mysteries of the continent, the conspiracies, and so on. This fellow only wanted to live a comfortable life. Therefore, Caesar would naturally keep a respectful distance from gods, demons, and even other strange foods. In order to avoid any more trouble, he directly found 2 scapegoats to send the statue to a place far away from Blackwing's nest. Then, they would completely destroy it. Chapter 165. The 2 unlucky fellows who were responsible for burning the statue were a battle lizard man and a goblin. Caesar didn't kill these 2 fellows together. Instead, he let them return smoothly, but asked Hogg to keep an eye on them. Caesar kept an eye on the whole group of subordinates who escorted the statue away, so that they could maintain their previous lives. But in fact, there were squires watching them all the time. After arranging all these chores, Caesar really couldn't take it anymore. There was nothing else that could stop the Black Dragon Overlord from falling into a deep slumber. This guy sealed the Emerald Palace, then piled all the gold and silver treasures in the treasury into a pile. He laid his head on top of it, his wings drooping, his limbs spread out, and snored. Just like that, he fell into a deep sleep. This silly sleeping posture actually reflected the change in Caesar's mentality to a certain extent. In the past, the little black dragon would always check the layout of the nest 4 or 5 times before he dared to sleep. And in his deep sleep, he would subconsciously curl his body into a ball and hide at the bottom of the nest. It was better to always stick to the wall of the nest, and it was easy to be awakened. That was a typical sign of insecurity. But now, this guy could already stretch out his 4 legs and fall asleep as soon as he laid his head down. Of course, Caesar's hibernation was different from that of other true dragons. Because of the autonomous control unit, black dragons could still maintain a certain degree of mental activity and 5 senses while in hibernation. In other words, he would not be in a deep sleep like those true dragons, who would only wake up after being stabbed in the face by adventurers. It was possible that as long as there was a slight movement, Caesar would be able to detect the abnormality and decide whether to fully wake up after making a judgment. When the Black Dragon Lord fell into a deep sleep, the outside world was still developing in an unstoppable manner. Iradia was still operating and did not change because of Caesar's sleep. First of all, in the human world's northern countries, the Lion Kingdom was now stabilizing. Duke Lionheart and Brindle's family maintained a superficial peace. Although everyone knew that civil war would break out sooner or later, no one could determine how long the current peace would last. The shapeshifters used Brindle's name and tried their best to maintain the balance in the surging undercurrent, supporting the situation that could collapse at any moment. The word peace was the best news for the ordinary citizens, but it was not good news for the mercenaries who relied on war for a living. Now that there was war in Rhine, the mercenaries who had been lured into the northern countries by the high price had lost their jobs. However, since they were already here, these people would not return without earning fame and fortune. Thus, They transformed into adventurers and set their sights on the wilderness surrounding the northern kingdoms. Coincidentally, there was a rumor about hidden treasures in the Theran Gobi. Hence, for a long period of time, the addition of foreign mercenaries gave the adventurers a boost to the stability of the adventurers' forces. This gave rise to a new wave of exploration in the northern countries. Their target was the Theran Desert, which was rumored to contain treasures. Of course, they also included the wilderness, elven forest, and Blackwing's Nest, which were further away. On the other hand, the Chimera had already returned to the elven forest. Speaking of which, Magus Hill could not believe that the strange-looking black dragon had actually let it go just like that. When the Chimera left the wilderness and returned to Blackwing's Nest, it still felt like a dream. The key to this illusion was that the Black Dragon Lord had not obtained any benefits from the Chimera. Although there were many Pinochet dragons who would not kill or even release creatures of opposing factions, it was inevitable that they would take advantage of them. Anything that fell into their hands would at least be skinned. However, the Black Dragon did not do this at all. On the third day after Magus Hill's injuries had healed, the Black Dragon Lord actually let him go and let him go. Although Magus Hill had heard of many abnormalities among the dragon species, he did not expect to meet one himself. Of course, what Magus Hill didn't consider was that if he didn't kill it and make it into a stew, the amount of things that could be obtained from a chimera would probably be much less than that of a human adventurer. Caesar really didn't care about that. After returning, Magus Hill immediately reported this matter to the leader of the elven forest, Kasia Whisperwind. He reported everything that he had seen and heard in Blackwing's Nest, his estimation of the strength of Blackwing's Nest, and his judgment of the Black Dragon Lord's character to the Elven King. In fact, he had gone to explore Blackwing's Nest under the guidance of the higher-ups. After all, with a powerful Pinochet dragon as a neighbor, no faction could possibly remain indifferent. Although the Elven King said that he was living in seclusion and did not care about external matters, he still had to have a rough understanding of the situation of the factions around the Elven Forest. However, in order to avoid any misunderstandings that might lead to chaos, Kasia only sent a chimera to explore and not a complete combat team. This was because if the chimera failed to infiltrate and was captured, the Elven King could say that it had nothing to do with the Elven Forest. However, if he sent a combat team, it would represent the will of the entire Elven Forest, and the implications would be completely different. Although they were a kind race, their political structure and methods of doing things were no different from the rulers of the humans. Back then, the Elven King had also used such methods to investigate the newly born Green Capital and the Mother of Poison. It seemed that he had even sacrificed a few giant eagles for this. The only thing worth mentioning was that the chimera, Magus Hill, did not tell the Elven King about the forest fairy Luna. Although Kasia Whisperwind seemed like a kind and wise elder to him, the chimera did not know how the higher-ups viewed things, so he did not rashly tell the Elven King about this matter. It should be known that a long time ago, in the eyes of the previous ruler of the Elven Forest and some elders, being associated with an evil dragon was actually no different from falling into evil. If Kasia Whisperwind thought the same, once this matter was revealed, it would undoubtedly bring great pressure to the elven race. As a chimera created by the moon goddess Su Luo, the chimera of the good faction was truly and completely a good person. Magus Hill was no exception. Although he did not have a good impression of the Black Dragon, Magus Hill sincerely treated the Elven Forest descendants as his friends. He did not want to bring any trouble to the Elven race because of this matter. Therefore, he went against his conscience and hid this matter from the Elven King, and did not mention this seemingly insignificant matter to Kasia. Instead, he first looked for Luna's parents, Mr. Tierrope and Madame Prin, and told them the matter in full detail, without any bias. As for whether to report to the Elven King, or use other methods to deal with this matter, Magus Hill felt that it should be left to Luna's parents to decide. Chapter 166. Caesar's hibernation this time would usher in the greatest leap in power in history. And because he was freed from the shackles of flight, Under the influence of the Type 3 enhancement potion, his body would also begin to grow tremendously. On the other hand, the bio-enhancement armor on his body had been completely expanded in this hibernation, truly becoming one with Caesar. Because of the autonomous control unit, his body also had a certain degree of adaptability, so the two were seamlessly fitting together. After awakening, Caesar could control the bio-enhancement armor as if it was his own body. With waves of snoring, the dragon's scales gradually softened, melted, and were then reabsorbed by the body. The black dragon was changing into new scales, and although the new scales were exactly the same in shape and luster as the original obsidian scales, the texture had undergone an earth-shattering change. They were now dark gold scales made of the same material as the biomass gear. As the black dragon slumbered in the treasury of the Emerald Palace, his dimensional suppression was also flourishing. From its initial appearance to its peak, the dimensional suppression was now comparable to an orthodox old dragon's draconic aura. It was even stronger than an ordinary old dragon, and was about the same as an old red dragon. Therefore, every time this dragon slept uncomfortably and rolled his body, the dimensional suppression he leaked was like an avalanche or a tsunami. It was extremely penetrative, causing all the dragon descendants near the treetop fortress to tremble like quails. If not for the black dragon lord subconsciously knowing to avoid Luna, there was no telling what kind of sickness the little fairy who lived in the house next to him would have gotten. When other dragons slept, due to their own physique, they would generally have a huge impact on their surroundings. For example, the red dragon's hibernation grounds would gradually turn into lava, while the blue dragon's hibernation grounds would slowly be covered in yellow sand. This was not a subjective decision, but a natural influence on the environment. The more powerful a dragon was, the greater its influence on its surroundings. For example, as soon as Caesar stepped into the green dragon's treasury, he knew that the old dragon liked to stay here. This was because this place was built with jade, and the walls were stabilized by magic. There were many green plants, moss, and vines all over the walls. They even spread into the interior of the treasury, like an indoor garden. Of course, these things had long been cleaned up by the orcs. Caesar was hibernating in a brand new treasure trove that belonged to the Black Dragon Lord. Normally, when a black dragon of his size was hibernating, the surrounding areas would definitely rot into a puddle of filthy and foul water. However, Caesar did not have this talent. Fortunately, he did not know how. Otherwise, seeing the beautiful jade palace become like that, this fellow with a brain circuit that was completely different from a normal dragon would probably die of heartache. Apart from the rarely used acid breath, this fellow was now completely cut off from the black dragons of Eladia. He didn't know any of the black dragon's talents or spells that they were proficient in. However, that infant dragon who had been living in fear back in the day still managed to savagely grow into a terrifying giant dragon despite having so many enemies. The current him, whether in terms of power or influence, had far surpassed his mother back then, the female black dragon in her prime. However, in terms of influence, it was hard to say. Perhaps that female dragon ran away far away after being chased away by Sylvia, and coincidentally found a rich backer like the old red dragon or the old blue dragon. Then, her influence would expand too quickly. It was worth recalling that regardless of whether it was Garen's silly and honest look or Blakesia's arrogant personality, they were all different from the usual black dragon, Whelp's viciousness. In that case, these triplets might even be mixed blood. Caesar's hibernation time had always been relatively short. Judging from the previous situation, this fellow's longest hibernation time was no more than 2 years. Compared to a normal young dragon's hibernation time of 5 to 10 years, it was on a completely different level. It was not that this fellow was exceptionally gifted. It was precisely because Caesar was trash in terms of dragon inheritance that he could complete a hibernation in a very short period of time. It should be known that the hibernation of a true dragon was not only for physical development, but also for the absorption and digestion of the dragon's inheritance, as well as the generation and understanding of their talents. Physical growth only accounted for a small part of their hibernation period, not even half of the time. From this point of view, Caesar's ecology was more like a degenerated dragon beast that had lost its intelligence. To be precise, this fellow is actually a dragon beast, but the kind with intelligence that received a soul from another world. However, this time, Caesar broke his hibernation record. This fellow slept for a total of 3 years. What happened during these 3 years? First, Gaul brought the stone crow beastmen back. They traveled a long distance, circling the elven forest to the east, going to the no man's land to the north, and reaching the turbulent western sea to the west. They went to every place that they could. However, things did not develop as the Black Dragon Lord had hoped. The Stone Crow beastmen spent a lot of effort, but it was to no avail. They did not find any traces of the Tauran tribe anywhere. As for the south, there was no need to go. That was the territory of the Northern Kingdoms. To go around the Northern Kingdoms alliance and explore the south, the time and energy consumption was immeasurable. Although there were unavoidable twists and turns when traveling in the wild, the beastmen fortunately did not suffer any major losses. After Hogg brought the Stone Crow clan back, he was relieved. At least he did not have to disturb the Black Dragon Lord's hibernation. He could let Blackwing's lair continue to operate as planned. Although it was said to be operating as planned, there were actually more things happening in Blackwing's lair than before. First of all, the most chaotic scum like the kobolds and gnomes were especially difficult to manage. They happened to be in charge of mining or veins and smelting metals. Therefore, Hogg had to transfer a considerable number of clansmen to keep an eye on them at all times, wasting a lot of manpower. On the other hand, human activities were becoming more frequent. Blackwing's lair was affected by their interference. The resources that were transported here from the Dark Region were discovered. The mercenaries and adventurers in the lawless lands were actually no different from robbers. After discovering their targets, they immediately attacked the wild boar people and robbed them by force. This caused Hogg to have no choice but to send more demon dogs and flying dragons to be in charge of escorting the goods. However, the powerful monsters attracted even more attention. Some of the armies in the northern kingdoms started to become restless. Also, the Dark Mantle Manticores in charge of the wild herds were also attacked and robbed. Also, the abandoned stronghold in Therengobi was also visited by a large number of people. Back then, the skeleton dragon probably did not kill the adventurers cleanly enough. Although it killed them, it still allowed those adventurers to spread the news. After communicating with the shape-shifting monsters hiding in Lion Country, Hogg found out that there were rumors among the human countries about the buried treasures in the abandoned stronghold. They said that it was the property left behind by the leader of the ancient Orc Empire. This drove countless adventurers to go there. As the core area, the newly born Blackwing's lair opened its doors to welcome guests. In the past 3 years, there were adventurers coming to visit almost every month. The Blackwing clan was also very friendly. Currently, they had already killed more than 100 adventurers and strung their skulls into bone staffs and hung them at the edge of Blackwing's lair. At the same time, Hogg also kidnapped 3 small nobles who said that they were full of adventurous spirit but were actually just reckless nobles. He asked the northern kingdoms for a ransom and only let them go after they were satisfied. Originally, he wanted to treat them equally and kill them all. However, these people were not ordinary people. They represented the faces of some of the Northern Alliance countries. Before the Black Dragon Lord woke up, Hogg did not dare to completely offend those countries. This was because he was afraid that a war would break out. He was afraid that he would disturb His Majesty's sleep and anger Caesar. Chapter 167. In the year 1636 of Iradia's third epoch, Blackwing's lair still attracted adventurers who were keen on seeking death. After all, there weren't many famous foreign factions that one could come into contact with in the Northlands. The only ones that people could see were Blackwing's lair and the Elven Forest. The flying apes of Monster were in a friendly relationship with the Northlands. Due to the closed ecology and kind nature of the Elven Forest, only the slave hunting teams would head there. The more serious adventurers with ambitions would make Blackwing's lair their first target. In the past 3 years, people had developed the misconception that Blackwing's lair had many monsters and riches. Now, there were even merchants selling maps of the terrain of Blackwing's lair that were even more detailed. Everything was because they knew that there was a dragon living there. To humans, dragons meant magic and treasures. Although the Blackwing clan had always dealt with adventurers cruelly, the skulls hanging at the edge of the green field didn't scare the adventurers. Instead, they surged forward even more fiercely. Blackwing clan, the collective name for all of the Black Dragon's descendants. Everyone had beautiful dreams of slaying a dragon. It was as if as long as they entered that place, they would immediately gain fame and wealth. Not only would they be able to kill the master of Blackwing's nest, they would also be able to pick up 2 dragon eggs and raise them. They would then become dragon tamers and live a carefree life. It seemed that no one had thought of this before. Indeed, Iradia had slain countless Pinochet dragons, but the ones who died the most were always those so-called dragon slayers. However, the current situation was also caused by the fact that the legendary Dragon King had never appeared before the public. Although the rumors in the northern kingdoms were vivid and colorful, until now, no one could guarantee that they had seen the real face of the Dragon King, nor could they clearly describe the size, power, magic, and nature of the Dragon King. Such uncertainty not only aroused people's curiosity, it also promoted the adventurers' wishful thinking. Many people suspected that the dragon had been severely injured in the battle with the Mother of Poison and was at death's door. It was waiting for a hero blessed by the gods to slay it with a single slash. From there, it could enter the upper class and be sought after by all the noble ladies and madams. This was a common plot in bards and poems. People were deeply affected by it. Of course, adventurers weren't all muddle-headed fools with delusions. There were also some groups with true strength and experience, such as this 25-man group. They had come from a central free trade city-states and had spent a full 3 months gathering intelligence in the Northlands, purchasing weapons, and finally setting off for Blackwing's lair after everything was ready. Now, the most experienced, of course. Ants were experienced thieves estimated that if the terrain here was as described on the market, they would only take a day's time to reach the core of Blackwing's lair as long as they didn't cause a commotion. Of course, under the ideal situation where they wouldn't be harassed by the Blackwing clans. However, the result was almost certain. They had lost their way. Of all the maps circulating in the markets of the various countries in the northern lands, there was not a single one that wasn't randomly fabricated. Up till now, there were very few people who had come out of Blackwing's lair alive. The only exceptions were those few minor nobles who had been captured and ransomed back. As for those minor nobles, for the sake of their dignity, they would definitely keep their mouths shut and not talk about it. In fact, they would even wish that they could forget about this period of time. Damn it, these northerners are really despicable. Gray spat on the ground and pushed aside the thorns in front of him. He carefully stretched out half of his body and said, "These damned bastards, let them be captured by the demons. Bastards who can even fabricate exploration maps don't deserve to live. Don't talk so much. We should have thought of this. There isn't even a decent guild in this place. Those snakes, scorpions, and insects will naturally come out." Serrato leaned on the tree to his right and said, "To be honest, if we're lucky and see that black dragon, we really don't know how to fight. The information we've gathered before probably won't count." That's true. After taking a few glances in that direction, Gray shrank back. This was a tall and sturdy man with a face full of stubble and bulging muscles. He held a broadsword with a single edge. He was a warrior in charge of patrolling the camp after setting up camp. The warrior sat down and took out a piece of smoked meat from his pocket. He took 2 bites and said to his companion beside him, "I heard that it's an old black dragon. We've never hunted one of this age before. Also, this place is its lair. Hey, do you know how wizards equip their mage towers with magic? I guess it's the same for dragons." "It's not the same." Serrato's expression was solemn, and his words were sharp. This guy called himself a ranger, but in reality, he was a thief who acted as a scout and assassin in the team. There won't be so many squires in a mage tower. The 2 of them patrolled the camp in the dark and used idle chatter to drive away the tiredness that was constantly invading them. Gray looked at the snoring tent and suddenly asked, "Hey, miss, I don't think the captain really wants to slay a dragon, right?" Serene was, of course, not a woman, but he was very skinny and liked to beat around the bush when fighting. He always hid behind the back and used dirty tricks, so he was affectionately called Miss by the members of the team. Of course not. Serene, who was used to it, did not mind. He continued his companion's words and said, "You didn't see anything." Halfway through his sentence, the thief suddenly shouted and sounded the alarm. In the darkness, countless fine red dots suddenly appeared. The members of the team who were still sleeping quickly got up and picked up the weapons in their hands. They looked around vigilantly. The camp had been surrounded. Gnolls walked out of the darkness with grins on their faces. They held the same standard flail in their hands, and most of them were wearing light armor. They greedily stared at the humans in the encirclement, sticky saliva dripping from their mouths. "Gnolls!" The leader of the team walked out of the tent and looked at the number of gnolls around. He was slightly relieved, but then he frowned and said, "There aren't many of them. But why are these guys wearing armor? They look like humans." He even suspected that he had seen wrongly. Gnolls were the greediest and most ferocious race. They would not communicate with other intelligent species, and their abilities were limited. Even the simplest light armor was not something these gnolls could make. Where did these gnolls get their armor? Chapter 168. Before the humans had time to think, the surrounding gnolls were already sharpening their swords and impatiently preparing to attack. Whooshing sounds rang out as a short spear with a metal tip and a wooden trunk struck Gray, tearing open the warrior's chain armor and leaving a deep wound. These fellows weren't friendly at all in their first meeting. The injured Gray took a few steps back and glanced at the wound on his body. He then moved forward again and roared angrily, "Slaughter these filthy scum." On the other side, the gnolls didn't say anything. Most of them wore light armor and landed on their hind legs, swinging their hammer as they pounced forward. A fight was about to break out. According to Caesar's assessment equipment, the individual combat ability of an ordinary gnoll was equivalent to that of a normal human soldier. They were weaker than elite soldiers and couldn't compare at all to these adventurers who had specialized in various aspects. However, the gnolls had the advantage in numbers and also had a natural advantage. They had night vision and could move freely in the dark mantle, making it difficult for humans to reach. Therefore, the adventurers felt pressure from the moment they made contact. These gnolls were armed and wearing light armor and were much harder to deal with than the ordinary gnolls. "Boss, should we disperse them?" At this time, the only spellcaster in the camp stood out and asked the leader. The reason why this team was more advanced than other adventurers was because of their rich experience, seamless cooperation, and even more because they had a mage. Spellcasters, no matter where you were in Iradia, were a rather rare profession. They were also the core of advanced adventurers. This was a young man. His level wasn't high, and he was a middle mage who had just left the fledgling stage. He had a head of fine black hair, pale skin, and a typical southern face. The leader was a middle-aged great warrior. Although his energy wasn't as exuberant as a young lad, his mind was meticulous and he had rich experience. "The night is still young. Now is not the time for you to make a move." Under his guidance, the adventurers formed a circle around each other in a defensive position, maintaining a tight and stable formation. They were like a meat grinder, killing the gnolls that pounced forward. But as time passed, not only did this not have any effect, the situation became even more critical. One of the characteristics of low-level species like the gnolls and kobolds was their high reproduction rate and short reproductive cycle. So after all these years of accumulation, even the Black Dragon Lord did not know how many gnolls Hogg had under his command. Anyway, there was an endless stream of gnolls jumping out of the forest, almost endless, and constantly joining the attack on the humans. At this time, casualties began to appear in the 25-man team. Use the smelly sack. Looking at the densely packed gnolls, the leader of the humans finally said that after carefully understanding the distribution of monsters in the north, they had temporarily purchased a lot of small tools from the northern countries. Among them, There were stink sacks used to deal with large groups of gnolls. But before this, the leader had been holding back. For adventurers, every penny had to be carefully calculated and used on the edge of the blade. So when he saw that the number of gnolls had reached a certain level and that the stink sacks had the greatest effect, he finally ordered his team to use them. The most obvious advantage of the gnolls was their sensitive sense of smell. They could easily distinguish every smell in the air, but this was also their biggest weakness. Iradia had been around for so many years, and the humans had already figured out a set of methods to deal with all kinds of monsters. These small tools, which could play a huge role in a critical moment, were carried by every member of the adventurers. So when these adventurers threw the stink sacks made from a mixture of skunk secretion and pickled herring juice on the ground and stomped on them, a fainting smell immediately spread out. The savage, low intelligence, and defenseless gnolls were immediately hit after a second. The originally continuous attack collapsed in an instant. They whimpered, retreated, and then scattered in all directions. These guys were not afraid of death, but such a stench was unbearable for them. Of course, there were some smart ones among them. After taking 2 steps back, they immediately began to howl at the sky. Awoo! Due to the continuous stream of adventurers entering Blackwing's nest over the past few years, the clans under the Black Dragon Overlord had gradually gotten used to it. Hence, not every group of adventurers would alarm the leaders of the upper echelons. Many of them were dealt with by the clans that discovered the adventurers at the first instance. Only when they encountered enemies that they could not deal with would the beasts of Blackwing's nest sound the alarm and call for support from other clans. Like now, hurry up and leave now to get rid of them. The leader held his breath and ordered in a deep voice. The stink sacks not only caused great damage to the gnolls, but also affected humans. Of course, this was not the most important thing. What was important was that he saw through the intentions of these beasts. They're calling for support. The adventurers did not continue to be attacked, and the pressure on the adventurers was greatly reduced. Just as they breathed a sigh of relief, they listened to the leader's order and began to retreat, preparing to enter the forest to get rid of the gnolls. However, at this moment, something strange suddenly happened. The howls of the gnolls seemed to have awakened something. Just a moment later, the entire Blackwing's nest shook slightly. This was not an exaggeration. The ground was really shaking, as if there was an earthquake. Whether it was the gnolls who escaped to avoid the stink sacks, the humans who were holding their weapons and preparing to retreat, or the other Blackwing clans, they all felt an indescribable sense of oppression rising in their hearts. It was true. Something really rose from Blackwing's nest. It was a huge shadow. The wings on its back seemed to cover the sky. The bright moon dimmed, and the terrifying aura seemed to have frozen time. Leader, is this our target? Gray's face was pale as he looked at the huge creature that could only be described as a seat. His legs could not help but tremble. He looked back and saw that his companion, the thief Serattle, was constantly retreating. I think so. The leader's heart was cold. Even if he could not see the creature's face, he could tell that it was at least 20 meters tall. Marcia above, a 20-meter-tall black dragon. What kind of concept was that? The black dragon's body was only slightly larger than the white dragon's. It was a relatively small dragon species among the Penachet dragons. An old green dragon could reach 20 meters, a red dragon could reach 30 meters, and a black dragon was only about 18 meters. What was a 20-meter-tall black dragon? An extremely old black dragon? An ancient dragon? The leader did not dare to think about it anymore. At this moment, dragon-slaying warriors, evil dragons, and treasures were all thrown to the back of his mind. Survival was the only thought in this group of people's minds. He could not suppress the fear in his voice and urgently asked the spellcaster for help. Quickly cover our aura and let us go. They wanted to turn around and start fleeing, but the black dragon gently leaped up and spread its wings. Crimson flames immediately tore through the night sky. Before these people could run 2 steps, the strong wind pressure knocked them all to the ground. In the blink of an eye, the black dragon was already in front of them. The terrifying giant beast half stood up and looked down at the almost paralyzed humans. I'm very happy to see you, humans. Chapter 169. Oh, gods above. Many of them couldn't help but start praying. It was no wonder that they were shocked. The dragon that appeared in front of them was completely different from the dragons that they knew. It had a black gold luster and a protruding chin that seemed to be cast from steel. It also had fangs that also flashed with metallic patterns. It also had armor that covered its entire body and seemed to grow out of its body from the inside out. It also had a ferocious and terrifying head with crisscrossing horns. If this place was the plain of Azeroth, these guys would probably think that this was the wings of death that had been driven mad by the ancient gods. Unfortunately, this place was not. In Iradia, people could only respectfully call it the Dragon King with amazement. This was a title that was recognized by the human world because of the widespread rumors. If it was in the past, adventurers would most likely think that this title did not live up to its name. They would speculate that this was a title that was made up to make the evil dragons fight for fame and profit and kill each other. It was neither true nor lasting. But now, if someone could see its true appearance, they would feel that this title was not exaggerated at all. In fact, it was extremely appropriate. The Master of Blackwing's nest was so different that one could tell how powerful it was just by looking at it. It was completely worthy of such a flamboyant and fearless title. In fact, when facing it, these 23 adventurers, 2 of whom had died, could not help but recall the ancient era of Iradia, the era that was ruled by the gods and dragons. This time, Caesar really had a stage of growth after his hibernation. Not only did his body size and strength increase, but his overall ability had also undergone a qualitative leap due to the seamless integration of the bio-boost armor and his body self-adaptation. When he first fought with the Mother of Poisons, the assessment device's value was between 375 and 428. But now, Comprehensive Combat Ability Assessment, 594 to 703. This value had completely surpassed Sylvia's. Now, he could kill that proud old green dragon in a fair and square manner without resorting to surprise attacks. This guy was gradually moving towards the legendary realm, which was a realm that only old dragons and even ancient dragons could reach. Once he touched the threshold of the legendary realm, it meant that he would have a foothold in the entire Iradia. The glowing crimson vertical eye, which was completely different from that of any other dragon species, was quietly sizing up these adventurers. In order to face a giant dragon, they had specially purchased equipment that could resist the dragon's aura. However, they were still unable to resist the abyssal aura of the Black Dragon Lord. This only allowed them to barely stand and not fall to the ground. I'm very happy to see you, humans. Caesar stood upright with his hind legs on the ground. The black dragon, standing on his hind legs, was much more majestic than he had imagined. He had even surpassed the height of an ordinary old black dragon. Moreover, there was no need to elaborate on how strong this fellow was. He was much stronger than any other black dragon. The visual pressure he brought was unimaginable. He was indeed very happy, because when it came to adventurers, Caesar had always held a fearful attitude when he was young. He would avoid them if he could, especially when he was just born. The young dragon feared the horrifying upright ape like a tiger. He was afraid that he would be caught one day and brought back to be reared in captivity and made into soup. But with the passage of time, the little black dragon also grew wildly. The young dragon that had been uneasy because of its inability to use magic was now finally able to look down on the things that it had been afraid of in the past with a condescending attitude. This feeling was super cool. Existence affected consciousness. Caesar, this fellow, was now walking further and further on the path of being a villain. At least from a human's point of view, that was indeed the case. Greetings, great Dragon King. The leader of the adventurers did not care about the cold sweat that was constantly seeping out of his forehead. He bowed and spoke with a stiff and hoarse voice. What are you doing here? Caesar's opening statement was very simple. He was not a dragon that killed indiscriminately. Moreover, the human adventurers were endless like locusts. Killing these few people would not be of any use. It was better to capture them and see if they could squeeze something out of these guys. Yes, what are we doing here? The adventurers looked at each other. They could not possibly say that they were here to slay the dragon. Could they? After seeing the true appearance of the Black Dragon Lord, no one dared to raise their weapons against this huge, monster-like black dragon. Their original lofty words and aspirations had long been thrown out of the window. The only thing that was worth rejoicing about now was that this was obviously a dragon that could be communicated with. Regardless of what kind of temperament the other party had, being able to communicate was always a good thing. Perhaps they could find some opportunities from it. But how should they continue the conversation? The Black Dragon Lord did not seem to have any ulterior motives, but the adventurers believed that the evil dragon would not let them go so easily. So, their next move surprised Caesar. The leader of these guys gave a few glances to his companions, and then all of them knelt on one knee and shouted, "Legendary Dragon King, your power is unparalleled. We have followed your footsteps and are willing to become your most loyal servants, serving you with all our hearts." These words were said very neatly and smoothly. It was obvious that it was not made up on the spot, but had been prepared long ago. It seemed that they had also used this on other true dragons before, kneeling and begging for mercy. Come to think of it, adventurers shouldn't be too shameless. Most of these guys were non-believers. Even if they had faith, it would be shallow or superficial. After dealing with monsters in the wild for a long time, they would naturally be infected with some evil habits. So for the sake of benefits and survival, these guys didn't have the concept of honor. They would do anything, including kneeling and begging for mercy after discovering that their target was too strong. Most of the adventurers were not just adventurers. Depending on the situation, they would sometimes become mercenaries, sometimes bandits and executioners, and sometimes they would become the minions of evil dragons. I'm very pleased that you all have such thoughts. The black dragon snorted twice, and 2 streams of white smoke came out of his nose. His tone was very good, but before the adventurers could rejoice, the guy suddenly changed his tone and said, "Husky, capture these guys and strip them of everything." Of course, Caesar was not so gullible. These guys were obviously adventurers who came to slay dragons for fame and fortune, but changed their words at the last minute. If they were really evil humans who came because of his reputation, they would not have fought with the gnolls. Hearing the Black Dragon Lord's order, the dragonkin flying dragons behind him immediately rushed up with a hiss, using their powerful legs to grab the bodies of the adventurers and threw them into the dungeon. No one resisted. Under the gaze of the terrifying, ferocious giant beast, there might be a chance of survival if they obeyed, but resistance would only lead to death. Chapter 170. Being caught by a powerful evil dragon might be an extremely tragic experience for these adventurers, a turning point that would affect the trajectory of their lives. However, in the eyes of the evil dragon that the adventurers spoke of, it was nothing more than a change after waking up from a boring sleep, an insignificant interlude in life. After instructing the dragon descendant leader, Silly Husky, to throw these fellows into the dungeon and let the battle lizardmen strip them of all their belongings. Then he hung them up to see if they could pry anything useful out of their mouths. After that, the black dragon returned to the Emerald Palace. "Caesar, how are you going to deal with these people?" Only then did little Luna poke her head out from the thorns on his back. Although Caesar had rushed down from the treetop fortress as soon as he woke up, he did not forget to bring the little fellow along. Little Luna was a little curious. According to the big, stupid dragon's temperament towards outsiders, he would probably kill all these people at this time. It was not that this kind of thing had not happened before. The little fellow had seen it many times and was already somewhat immune to it. But this time, the Black Dragon Lord's choice seemed to be different. "How are we going to deal with them?" The black dragon stroked his steel chin and said, "Strip these fellows clean of everything that can be squeezed out of them, and then let them go." "Let them go?" "Of course, we won't just let them go directly. Create a small accident and let them think that they escaped with their own efforts," Caesar said. He did not explain his intentions to the little fellow. He knew that after this group of people returned to the northern countries, they would definitely spread the news of the Dragon Lord as cruelty and fierceness vividly describing the strength of the master of Blackwing's nest. This would cause a commotion and set off a wide range of discussions. This was what Caesar wanted. He remembered that in the names of the trophies that he had received before, there was a Black Jade trophy called Newcomer, Black Jade Grade Magic Resistance. This fellow's memory had always been good, so he knew that this was actually a reward based on reputation. Now that the Black Dragon had grown up, he had strength and influence, so he did not need to be afraid of some threats brought about by reputation. He could try to take the initiative to obtain rewards in this regard. In fact, this fellow had originally intended to let Kaki's shape-shifting monster be in charge of this matter. But after thinking about it, it felt a little like blowing his own trumpet, which made him feel a little embarrassed. Now that a group of adventurers had come, Caesar might as well let these people be in charge of spreading the news of Blackwing's nest. If they hadn't coincidentally bumped into the Black Dragon Lord, with the strength of this 25-man team, it would have been impossible for them to even touch the Black Dragon Lord. Hog, with his legendary weapon, would have been more than enough to deal with them. With the awakening of the Black Dragon Lord, Blackwing's nest, which had been curled up, gradually entered a period of activity. Before this, Hog was always worried that adventurers would visit Blackwing's nest and disturb His Majesty's slumber, so he did not dare to disperse his forces. When Caesar woke up, apart from the dragon descendants who had left their guards behind, the remaining members of the Blackwing clan rapidly expanded their range of activity, surging into the wilderness and Therengobi to provide assistance to the grazing Shadow Manticore and the wild boar men who were escorting supplies. Speaking of grazing, it was worth mentioning that the construction of the underground lake in the wilderness, as well as the drainage and water storage project, had been completed a few days ago. Currently, some small-scale adjustments and monitoring matters were being carried out. Subsequently, the Black Dragon Lord fulfilled his promise and allowed this clan and the important shape-shifting monsters to join the ranks of the special clans. Now, Blackwing's Nest had as many as 5 special clans: the Wild Boar Men, Orcs, Gnolls, Ankhegs, and shape-shifting monsters. It seemed a little too many. After all, there were only slightly more than 10 clans under Caesar's rule. This ratio was a little ridiculous. If this continued, the significance of the special clan's existence would be weakened. This was also the reason why Caesar wanted to expand his reputation. Blackwing's Nest needed more clans to join. As Caesar Ordoronzo Targaryen had almost never appeared in the outside world to commit evil deeds, his actual influence in the Northland was even less than that of Sylvia, the mother of poisons. It was very difficult for him to attract the evil clans of the same camp to join him, even though he was known as the King of Dragons. Now that Blackwing's Nest was on the right track, the next step of Caesar's plan was to expand his influence. On the other hand, during these 3 years, Mr. Tierrope and Madame Perrin were extremely anxious. Luna's parents couldn't believe the Chimera Magusher's words. Of course, they didn't believe that their daughter would run over to the side of an evil dragon and become its claws and fangs. However, the chimeras of the good faction wouldn't lie. This was known to all. After repeated questioning and confirmation, they believed that their daughter must have been coerced. Even if she wasn't coerced, she must have been bewitched by the evil dragon. No matter what, their daughter wouldn't be willing to stay by the evil dragon's side. However, subjective denial couldn't solve the objective problem. The most important thing now was to figure out how to rescue their daughter. After knowing this, Luna's parents were actually a little afraid. This was because in this era, there are no written laws. They didn't know how His Majesty Kasia would deal with this if they reported this matter to the Elven King. After much consideration, Mr. Tierrope didn't dare to report this matter in the end. Instead, he secretly sought out his family and friends, secretly asking for help from other powerful tribes. He asked for some tribes that had the ability to resist the evil power to rescue his daughter. Although he was on tenterhooks and extremely difficult, the process was unexpectedly smooth. The giant eagles, elven rangers, and chimeras immediately agreed when they heard the forest fairy's request. As tribes of the good faction, these fellows were all very emotional. They sympathized with the young parents who had lost their beloved daughter. At the same time, They were also incomparably indignant about what had happened to the fairy girl. Before they even met, many of them had already labeled the black dragon as evil. In the end, they thought of a way to sneak out of the elven forest while avoiding the elven king's gaze. These ambitious people were all filled with righteous indignation and were prepared to take the fairy back from the evil dragon. Less than 3 days after their departure, however, the men of ambition returned dejectedly. The situation in Blackwing's nest was completely different from what the Chimera had said. It was completely contrary to what the Chimera had said. Not only were the guards there not lax, but they were also rather strict. The elven rangers tried 7 times, but they were discovered by the patrolling demonic hounds every time. In order to avoid a bloody conflict before they saw the fairy, the rangers had no choice but to retreat. In the end, they didn't even see the treetop fortress that the Chimera had spoken of, let alone the Emerald Palace and the Black Dragon Lord. The ambitious people strongly condemned the Chimera, but they didn't give up. Thus, they each used their own abilities to ask for help from the more powerful tribes of their respective tribes. Soon, a new rescue team was quickly formed. This time, there were elven spellcasters, old giant eagles, and strong chimeras. They even found help from unicorns. Thus, they were full of ambition and once again visited Blackwing's nest. However, this time, it was even worse. Due to the spellcasters, the stealth spell Shadow following the body covered the entire time, allowing the rescue team to successfully avoid the evil dragon's eyes, ears, and fangs and sneak into the core area of Blackwing's nest, the treetop fortress. However, they were soon discovered and immediately besieged. These foreign tribes that had sneaked into the blockade were immediately determined to be enemies by the flying dragons. Countless flying dragons that had built their nests around the perimeter rioted and immediately launched an attack, their cries incessant. Following that, the demonic hounds and orcs quickly arrived, completely surrounding these fellows and launching attacks without mercy. The rescue plan failed once again, and this time, they suffered heavy losses. Half of the nearly 50 members were captured by the evil dragon's kin. Their whereabouts were unknown, and it was unknown whether they were alive or dead. The rest were also forcefully pulled back by the spellcasters who risked their lives. This was simply terrible. Mr. Tierrope and Madame Balinway had never expected things to develop to this stage. They were all ordinary forest fairies, and had never experienced such a battle or dealt with such a huge matter. They were completely flustered and flustered. With so many tribes gone, it was impossible to keep the matter under wraps. It was passed up layer by layer, all the way to Garcia Whisperwind. Chapter 171. The morning was cold, with a hint of loneliness, faintly indicating that summer was coming to an end. The fairy couple was summoned, and under the guidance of the Taya elves, they set off at dawn, heading to the residence of Keja Yufeng. Although she was the elven king, the residence of the leader of the elven forest was neither huge nor grand. It was not a palace, but a small house casually built by the lake. If it weren't for the servants and all kinds of ancient creatures around, the fairy couple might have thought that it was an enlarged version of the fairy's treehouse. At the very least, it did not look much different in terms of extravagance and display. Luna's father, Tierrope, followed behind the fairies, full of anxiety and panic. His daughter's matter had caused a lot of trouble. More than 20 elven forest people had been captured and were trapped in Blackwing's nest. It was hard to imagine how Garcia would deal with them. The fairies were led to the garden outside the lake. The elven king was not arrogant and was already waiting for them there. In addition, the chimera and giant eagle were standing there. Almost all the members of the rescue team were present. Everyone in the elven forest knew that Her Highness Keja Yufeng was a kind and wise Taya elf. However, the forest fairies had very little presence in this big family. Very few of them had the chance to meet the leader of the elven forest. That was why they didn't know Keja's personality or how she handled matters. Because of the unknown, the fairies thought that the elven king was covered with a veil. They had no idea what was under the veil. Now the veil was lifted. Garcia Whisperwind turned around, her movements dignified and elegant. The crown on her forehead was woven with Yanan flowers and decorated with green jade and agate, announcing the wearer's status. As a long-lived species, it was hard to tell the age of the Tia elves from their appearance. The Elven King's face was very young. Although her eyes were long and narrow, they were not sharp. Instead, they were gentle and beautiful. She looked like a young human girl with a slender and graceful figure. Yes, the ferocious black dragon next door had made a mistake. That evil dragon had subconsciously assumed that Kasia was a brave and wise elven warrior. However, all the elves in the elven forest knew that Her Highness the Elven Queen was a woman. Moreover, she was very young, only a little over 200 years old. Her hair was white, and the sides of her hair were pulled behind her ears. Her neck was long and slender, and the collarbone on the collar of her silk-woven silver dress was like fresh snow in early winter. The first rays of the morning sun penetrated through the dense forest, forming a honey-colored backlight. Because she was favored by the moon god, the figure of the Taya elf was close to perfection no matter from which angle. She could be called a model of aesthetics among humanoid creatures. Seeing the fairy couple's arrival, Garcia nodded in greeting and said in a solemn yet gentle tone, "Good day, children of the forest. Welcome." This was the elven language. Within the elven forest, they rarely used the common language to communicate. Under normal circumstances, they would use the ancient elven language. Tierop glanced at his wife and felt that he should bear the responsibility and pressure in such a trial. Thus, he landed on the ground and bowed slightly. Taking a deep breath, he said, "Greetings, Elven Queen." Due to her nervousness, the forest fairy was a little tongue-tied and could only spit out a few dry words. Kasia's face was expressionless. She went straight to the point and asked with a slightly regretful tone, "Why didn't you tell me before?" The steam from the lake intertwined into a misty snow-white net in the early morning. The Elven Queen asked a few questions and received some answers. Only then did the fairy couple know that Kasia could sympathize and understand the matter of them begging others to risk their lives to rescue their daughter from Blackwing's lair. However, what truly disappointed and regretted the Elven Queen was that the fairy couple did not trust their leader and did not report the matter immediately. Kasia had personally told them that if they had left the matter to her to handle, things would not have ended up like this. After having a detailed understanding of the situation, Kasia did not punish the fairy couple as they had been on tenterhooks all this time. Instead, she said that she would start handling the matter and let them leave without a word. The Elven Queen is not as imposing as we imagined. Instead, she is very kind, Bailey Way said. This mother looked very much like her daughter, but her voice was not as crisp as Luna's. Instead, it had the thickness of a middle-aged woman. No matter what, Her Majesty Kasia knows about this matter and has agreed to help us handle it. This is a good thing. I believe our daughter will be back soon. I hope so. Tierop also heaved a sigh of relief, but he was still worried. But how important is the Elven Queen to this matter? Of course, Kasia took it very seriously. However, she did not show her emotions in front of her subordinates. Her mother had once taught her that as a leader, she had to grasp the power of silence in order to lead her people forward steadily. She had always kept this in mind and followed it at all times. Kasia knew that this matter was no longer just a matter of the forest fairies. They had other races trapped there as well, including chimeras, giant eagles, and even some adventurous elven rangers and unicorns. They had all been captured by Blackwing's lair. Due to the fact that the elven forest had always maintained a state of absolute isolation, such matters were rare in the history of the elven forest. Fortunately, Kasia knew how to handle it. Regardless of life or death, she had to know the situation of her people. Originally, Kasia did not intend to have any contact with Blackwing's lair. She knew that at that time, Blackwing's lair was a powerful force that was slowly rising. Its master was known as the Emperor by the humans. Kasia did not want to have anything to do with such evil. However, according to Chimera Magusher's description, the powerful black dragon seemed to have a different temperament compared to ordinary evil dragons. Furthermore, With her people in captivity and unknown whether they were dead or alive, Kasia had no choice but to change. After thinking about it, she decided to send an envoy group to probe the situation with the leader of Blackwing's lair. If things went well, Kasia was willing to pay a considerable sum of ransom, just like how she had negotiated with the Blue Dragon, and then redeem her people. If it did not work, Kasia also intended to let the envoy group take into account the actual situation and act according to the situation. She wanted to avoid any conflict as much as possible. The Elven Forest advocated peace. Initiating a war with other forces was not in line with Kasia Whisperwind's philosophy, regardless of whether the other party was righteous or evil. Of course, this did not mean that the Elven Forest did not have the ability and would never engage in war. If she was bullied to the face, Kasia would definitely lead her soldiers on a battlefield and let her enemies bleed. Chapter 172. Blackwing's Lair. The Blackwing clan had captured a total of 12 elven rangers, 3 chimeras, 2 giant eagles, and a unicorn. They were dragged into the treetop fortress by the battle lizardmen and beastmen. The elves were dragged by chains around their throats, while the other beasts were dragged by chains on the ground. The sharp and huge iron hooks pierced deeply into the shoulders of these beasts, leaving a dark trail of blood on the ground. In the end, they were thrown into the dungeons of the treetop fortress. Of course, this was not all. In the so-called rescue team, in the eyes of the Blackwing clan, it was a surprise attack team. A portion of them used teleportation spells to escape. The remaining ones were those who wanted to fight against evil to the end. As for the enemies who were unwilling to surrender, the Blackwing clan naturally showed no mercy. They simply killed all those who resisted. Caesar did not let Luna know about this matter. These fellows were obviously from the Elven Forest, and Luna treated them as her family. She probably would not be in a good mood after knowing about this matter. As for the reason why these fellows had infiltrated Blackwing's lair, Caesar did not understand. He had already released the Chimera. Could it be that Magus Hill did not know how to be grateful at all? After returning, he would recklessly fabricate rumors and incite others to attack Blackwing's lair. If that was the case, he would have let the wrong person go. If he had known, he would have killed this fellow behind Luna's back. Caesar thought to himself, it was rare that he did not bring the little fellow with him. Instead, he entered the dungeons of the treetop fortress alone to interrogate these kind-hearted people. There was only one dungeon in Blackwing's lair. It was not built by Caesar, but by its predecessor, the Green Capital. The old Green Dragon was very thoughtful. He had opened up a huge underground space under his treetop fortress, specially used to hold captives. Unfortunately, when Caesar arrived, there was nothing but a few half-rotten human corpses. Come to think of it, the stingy Green Dragon was not willing to waste food on something of no value. If the ransom was rejected, the person in the dungeon would not be far from death. Probably no one would be able to stay in the Green Dragon's dungeon for more than a year. The dungeon was large enough to accommodate Caesar's huge body. After all, this was a building made by dragons. Its vastness was far beyond the imagination of ordinary humans. Even if it was used to imprison a huge beast like the Horsegate lizard, there seemed to be no problem at all. Apart from Chief Steward Hogg, the Dragonkin leader, Husky, and the Beastmen and demonic hound guards who were originally here followed the Black Dragon Lord into the dungeon. After being remodeled by the Ankhags and the Wild Boars, the dungeon now had 3 floors. The first floor, which was used to imprison humanoids, had granite walls, while the second floor, which was used to imprison beasts, had steel walls. This was to prevent them from using their claws and teeth to dig through the ground to escape. As for the third floor, Caesar's original intention was to imprison powerful individuals. However, it was now in a half-finished state because even he had not figured out how to build that floor. Neither Sylvia nor Caesar had the spare money to build a floor for the dungeon, so the floor here was directly compacted. With the weight of the Black Dragon's claws, the floor would sink slightly when he stepped on it. Fortunately, the floor was dry and the air was good. The ink eggs and the wild boars must have taken the ventilation system into consideration when they renovated the dungeon, so that the place would not become dark and damp, and the stench would not affect their mood. To the clans of the Underdark, not only would this not affect their mood, it would even make them feel better. Caesar was too lazy to walk any further. He did not look at the chimeras, giant eagles, and other beasts locked up on the second floor. Instead, he stopped on the first floor and looked for the Taya elves with shackles around their necks. Your Majesty, the purpose of these fellows doesn't seem to be to attack us. They're sneaking around, more like they're here to steal. I'm guessing that these abominable scum want to steal your treasure. They've been using concealment spells to sneak into the treetop fortress, only revealing themselves when the wyverns discovered them. The one who spoke was Era. As the leader of the Black Dragon Lord's personal guards, he was responsible for the security of the core area. The Dragonkin leader was the first to discover the intruders. Groundless criticism. As soon as he spoke, an elven ranger who had been silent with his eyes closed immediately shouted, retorting, "The Taya elves have never harbored ill intentions towards money. Wealth means nothing to us." Due to their injuries and the darkness of the dungeon, the elven rangers could not even see the Black Dragon Lord's appearance clearly. They could only see a pair of red eyes. Is that so? Caesar lowered his head slightly and looked down at the captives, saying calmly, "You have entered the legal territory of a lord without permission. Is this what you should do to the kind Taya elves? Thieves. Evil Pinochet dragon." The elven ranger's face quickly flushed red. Most of these fellows were not afraid of death, but they were afraid of being labeled as evil and carrying a serious burden of honor. You kidnapped a pure and kind young lady. In order to help her escape the clutches of evil, we disregarded the danger and stepped into the heart of evil forces. I kidnapped? Caesar was stunned. Speaking of which, he did have such an idea. When the time came, he had planned to run to the human world and kidnap a few princesses, wait for the knights to rescue them, and then sell them at a clear price for money. In the end, why did these brainless warriors come knocking on his door before he could even do it? After a short pause, the Black Dragon realized that these fellows had come for Luna. After the Chimera returned, it must have spread some exaggerated rumors in the Elven Forest, causing these brainless warriors to think that the Forest Fairy had been kidnapped and impatiently rushed to his door. He really shouldn't have let that Chimera go. He should have secretly killed it behind Luna's back. Caesar regretted it for the second time. However, this was also good. Caesar's mind turned. He was just thinking about how to try to make contact with the Elven Forest when they came knocking on his door. He now had captives in his hands. If the races of the Elven Forest were as kind as the rumors said, they would definitely think of a way to get these fellows back. They would probably send messengers to negotiate peace. With the importance that the kind races attached to their own race, Caesar, who had the captives in his hands, would definitely have the upper hand. Thinking about it this way, Luna really was a cute little girl. She had helped him open up a breakthrough, and he could gain the upper hand without resorting to violence. Of course, if the other party was really that stupid, they might continue to send people to rescue them. Unfortunately, these fellows were not a threat to Caesar at all. In the end, they would only increase the number of people trapped in Blackwing's nest. Due to Luna, Caesar would not kill them, but he would definitely beat them up. Thinking about it, the Black Dragon's mood improved again. He did not care about these pitiful-looking captives. After instructing the Orc and Demonic Hound guards to ensure their food and not kill them, he left the dungeon and returned to the Emerald Palace to continue playing cards with the little girl. It was worth mentioning that during the 3 years that the Black Dragon had been asleep, little Luna had been very, very bored. So, slowly, she had drawn some of the new cards that Caesar had mentioned to her before. Now, there were more than 200 cards in little Luna's precious box. Of course, this was still a long way from the demand to manufacture cards and sell them. Caesar did not intend to sell Luna's painstaking efforts for money. These were just the original drafts. At this stage, he only wanted to verify the playability of the cards. The actual manufacturing would definitely be done by an assembly line. Caesar thought about it. Perhaps that would be Iradia's first assembly line workshop. Buffed. Chapter 173. They stood at the edge of Blackwing's lair. There were a total of 100 envoys that had gone to pay a visit to the Black Dragon Overlord. Among these people, only 3 of them were emissaries that had been ordered to negotiate. The rest were actually combat personnel. If a conflict really broke out, 100 people would not be able to cause any trouble in Blackwing's lair. However, this would at least allow the diplomatic mission to have some self-preservation power and delay the inevitable. Yes, as long as the mission did not collapse, it would be fine. There were archmages in this diplomatic mission, and they were also prepared with magical items. If something really went wrong, they would be able to open a void portal. The elven forest troops behind them were already prepared for battle. If things really went that far, the Elven King would be able to respond immediately and provide support. Garcia was well prepared, as if he was facing a great enemy. The battle had not even begun, but he had already mobilized so many people. After all, no matter what, the opponent was still a Pinochet dragon, and the perception of Pinochet dragons was deeply ingrained in the minds of other intelligent races. Garcia had to consider some unexpected situations. The emissary said something to the patrolling gnolls outside, then waited in silence with a contemptuous attitude. In his opinion, apart from the legendary dragons, all other true dragons apart from the gold dragons and the silver dragons were not worthy of respect. Asking to meet an evil Pinochet dragon in such a manner was simply laughable. The other party was not even a red dragon with a Pinochet crown. Although the Taya elves were a kind race, not all of them held the same view as the Elven King. As descendants of elves from ancient times, it was difficult for them to bow down to other creatures. Of course, the Taya elves could not blame their own leader, so they could only blame the forest fairies. These ignorant, foolish, and weak forest fairies, however, complaints aside, orders still had to be carried out. The emissary knew that he had a heavy responsibility on his shoulders. He had to think of a way to bring his people back home. So he quickly adjusted his attitude and put his personal feelings to the back of his mind, waiting quietly. Soon, the gnoll that had left returned, exchanging a few words with its companion and gnoll. It did not lead the way, but simply stepped aside and stared at the diplomatic mission. Fortunately, Magusher had given them a map. In order to reach the treetop fortress, they first had to cross the Greenfield River. Before they arrived, they first heard the sound of surging water. It sounded like the roar of a 9-headed lizard. The emissary saw that there were quite a few tributaries in the Greenfield River, some of them clearly showing signs of being opened up. These evil clans actually knew how to create rivers. Looking at the turbid and swirling river, this thought flashed through the emissary's mind. His heart palpitated slightly. Blackwing's nest seemed to be different from what he had imagined. However, the matter at hand was more important, and the emissary did not have time to think too deeply about it. To be honest, the weather today was terrible. As they got closer, the treetop fortress appeared in the storm like a tall ghost. As the elves got closer, uneasiness grew in their hearts. They seemed to be able to smell the terrifying black dragon's scent in the rain. The strong wind was filled with a suppressive smell. Before they left, King Kasia had shown them the Black Dragon Lord's appearance. It was a drawing based on Chimera Magusher's oral description. After 3 years, had it become stronger? The emissary looked around and found that the surrounding forest was densely packed with countless wyvern lairs. Pairs of red eyes, cunning and cruel, stared at them through the rain, full of greed. Although these evil wyverns didn't attack, they still caused people to shudder. Caleb, you have to be careful. Not long ago, the messenger still clearly remembered His Majesty Kasia's instructions. All of the Pinochet dragons are evil species that are greedy and ruthless. They are temperamental, their emotions fluctuate, and their egos are extremely high. A careless word can cause them to fly into a rage. Moreover, dragons rarely have the concept of guest authority. Since you are here as an emissary, you must be careful. Do not touch the dragon's authority and self-esteem. I know the nature of dragons. Please rest assured, Your Majesty. No matter what, I will not let you down. All the young, unmated male elves in the elven forest loved king, Kasia, Whisperwind. Therefore, even if there were some complaints about this matter, Caleb would definitely do his best to complete the order. A lone gnoll walked out of the treetop fortress, holding a weapon in its hand. It stood there and coldly looked at the visiting emissary group, allowing the rain to pour down on it. Caleb had lived for nearly 300 years and had seen many things. He could see that the gnoll was powerful and naturally recognized the legendary weapon in its hand. The elven emissary's mouth was wide open, his arms trembling uncontrollably. He had not seen the legendary Black Dragon Emperor, but all his understanding of true dragons had collapsed. Weren't dragons all greedy for wealth and treasures? How could they possibly bestow such a legendary weapon to their kin? Even the freaks of the dragon species, the famous anomalies in history, would never do such a thing. Could it be that everything before was a rumor, and the master of Blackwing's nest was not a dragon? That was impossible. Magus Hill had clearly seen it before. In the end, Caleb still did not understand what was going on. The group stopped temporarily, waiting for the emissary group to catch up. After watching for a while, Hogg opened the heavy door of the treetop fortress and nodded to the emissary group, indicating that they could enter the true core area of Blackwing's nest. The Black Dragon Lord that they had been looking forward to finally appeared in front of the emissary group. No matter how much he despised the Penachet dragons, even if he had seen Caesar's portrait, when faced with the Dragon Lord that he had to look up at 90 degrees, Caleb lost his words. All his bold words slipped into a hole of shame, and he trembled all over. Only when one saw it with their own eyes could they feel the fear that spread from their bones to their whole body. The leader of the Flying Dragons, who was obviously talented and cruel, was now as obedient as a quiet kitten, quietly crawling at the feet of the Black Dragon Lord. The contrast in size and posture made it even more dramatic. In the hall of the Emerald Palace, Caleb braced himself and bowed. "Greetings, legendary Dragon Lord. I am an emissary sent by the Elven Forest to visit our neighbors. Your Majesty, I represent the Taya elves, the giant eagles, the chimeras." This fellow's opening speech was long and complicated, and Caesar was not interested in listening. He stared at the emissary group, his scarlet eyes immediately causing unease and vigilance. "Emissary, I know why you are here." The Black Dragon grinned and laughed silently, going straight to the point in the manner that evil dragons were best at. A few days ago, the Elven Forest sent a powerful army in an attempt to attack Blackwing's nest. After that, their sneaky actions were discovered by my subordinates, and they immediately went berserk. Without any explanation, they attacked my kin, causing the people of Blackwing's nest to pay a heavy price. Chapter 174. Reversing Black and White. This was simply a blatant slander. Caleb raised his head and looked at the ferocious Black Dragon. His pupils trembled slightly. He couldn't believe that the dragon would say something like that. Everyone knew that the citizens of the Elven Forest wouldn't take the initiative to harm other creatures unless they were attacked from the outside. But now, when the Black Dragon Lord spoke, it was a completely different story. "Your Majesty." The messenger bowed, his tone solemn and distant. "We are here for this matter." He remembered the words of the King of Elves. If it is not necessary to refute the conclusion that the dragon has made, it is better not to try to refute it. It is better to continue with the dragon's words and use the art of language to explain it in a roundabout way and then explain it from another point of view. "They have intruded into your territory. We have to admit that," Caleb said. Caleb said, holding a staff carved from oak in his hand. It was coated with a layer of resin, giving off an oily glow and faintly rippling with the power of magic. But this is actually a terrible misunderstanding. They didn't come for no reason, nor did they want to attack Blackwing's nest. Please believe that all the people of the Elven Forest have good intentions. They want to visit you, just like we are now. Is that so? Caesar was noncommittal. Debating right and wrong was meaningless to him. What was important was the outcome of the matter and how to deal with it. "My subordinates have captured a total of 19 ferocious attackers and locked them in the dungeon. There are still 7 attackers who swore to die and attacked my kin like madmen, causing great damage to Blackwing's nest. They have been executed. As for the rest, I guess they have all escaped. 7 people. Although Caleb had expected this result, he still couldn't help but feel his heart palpitate. After all, creatures of the good faction were mostly sentimental creatures. To them, this death toll was hard to ignore. It meant that 7 of their close friends had disappeared. I'm very sorry. After a short wait, Caleb suppressed his emotions and lowered his head. For this, His Majesty Kasia has specially ordered us to come and apologize for offending the Dragon King. At the same time, we offer our friendship to you. The emissary turned his head. Petty, as the beginning of a memorable friendship, please bring forth the gift we have prepared for the honorable true dragon. When the gift box was opened, it was filled to the brim with gemstones that originated from the elven forest. As the lid of the box was lifted, the gemstones fell to the ground. The pale orange crystals were exposed in the air, and under the light of the Emerald Palace, they showed a circle of soft radiance. All the creatures in Iradia knew the preferences of the dragons. They were obsessed with shiny things, gold, silver, coins, and gems. As long as you were willing to spend money, it was not difficult to please them. Caesar did not reject the gift, but he only glanced at it and then looked away. Looking at the densely packed group of envoys, he grinned and said to Caleb, "Envoy, the honor guard in your hands is not bad. How reckless and straightforward. No matter how different it was, this black dragon could not change its nature as a Penishade dragon." The elven emissary thought to himself. The Black Dragon Lord's greed was undisguised. After accepting the box of valuable gemstones, he still wanted the item in his hands. Of course, this was not an ordinary oak tree honor guard, nor was it an item used to show identity and etiquette. It was a magical item that belonged to His Majesty Kasia, the spring. It could provide powerful magic to the spellcaster. At the same time that he said those reckless words, Caesar also stared at the honor guard in the hands of the emissary. He could see the wood grain in the depths of the material. That was the mark that it was born with. The black dragon had neither perception nor study of magical items, but he could see that this scepter was indeed unique and beautiful. In fact, it was made hundreds and thousands of years ago from the tender branches of the ancient tree of knowledge in the elven forest. The Taya elves had a unique craftsmanship and natural talent. They only needed to rely on magic to shape the magical plant into a magical item. "All right, for the sake of my people," Caleb said to himself. As the emissary of the elven forest, it was basic to be calm in the face of danger. He did not dare to hesitate. He held the honor guard horizontally and offered it with both hands. In order to maintain the dignity of the Taya elves, he had to pretend that he was giving it away voluntarily. At the same time, he also told the history of this treasure to the greedy dragon. In the eyes of the creatures in the elven forest, the lives of their clansmen were probably much more valuable than these treasures. Linley believed that even if he handed over this magical item, the Elven King would not blame him as long as his captured clansmen could return home safely. Caleb was not the fairy couple. He understood His Majesty Kasia's character. Even if Kasia knew about this, he would probably agree to let him do so. The black dragon showed an extremely ugly smile in Caleb's eyes and took the Taya elf staff. To be honest, this thing was not very useful to Caesar, but he still wanted it. This item was very important to Luna. It could be a gift for her. Of course, at this time, Caesar did not ask for any more gifts from the Taya elves. His goal was not to ruthlessly slaughter the elven forest, but to use this opportunity to establish a bridge of communication and trust. Under the circumstances of not using violence, he could slowly suppress them step by step. If he slaughtered them all at once, these cowardly intelligent creatures would definitely hide and not have any dealings with Blackwing's nest. When that time came, he could only use his fangs and claws to tear open the door of the elven forest. This was not in line with the strategy that the Black Dragon Lord had set for the elven forest. In fact, this level was just right. It could make them bleed, and it happened to be within the range that the elven forest could accept. There was no need to take it to heart. While Caleb was still secretly worrying about whether the evil dragon would make more unreasonable requests, Caesar had already planned to ease the atmosphere. So, in the following time, the Black Dragon Lord asked the elven ambassador about the scenery and history of the elven forest. He also showed interest in the ecology of the kind creatures and did not mention the matter of asking for any more treasures. As time passed, the conversation between the two sides became more harmonious. Caleb also cooperated and did not mention anything about handing over the captives. Instead, he began to introduce the queen of the elven forest to the Black Dragon, their Majesty Kasia Whisperwind. It was only now that Caesar knew that the queen was a female elf. Speaking of which, he had always thought of her as a stubborn old woman who only had one expression on her face. On the day of departure, go and bring out the people of our friends. The Black Dragon stood outside the treetop fortress and said to the wyvern leader who had been following behind him, "As you wish, master." Like a domestic dog biting a bone, the wyvern that received the order immediately flapped its wings. Its wings drew a circular trajectory in the air. It first flew up a little, then swooped down and went straight into the wide entrance of the dungeon. The husky quickly returned with a team of battle lizard men who were escorting the captives. It was worth mentioning that Caesar had already given the order to remove the chains on the captives' necks and shoulders. After all, it was not good to let the Elven Forest ambassadors see the miserable state of their people. It was very disgraceful and would plant a knot in the hearts of these fellows. Because they had spent a long time in the dungeon, they were already captured when Caesar was asleep. The captive Elven Rangers could not help but squint their eyes when they saw the light of day again. They had the illusion that it was a lifetime ago. Their faces were all sickly pale, and their minds were in a trance. As for the giant chimera eagle and unicorn beasts, they were as thin as firewood. Their skin was tightly attached to their bones, making them look like skeletons. "Sorry," Caesar said to the elven ambassador, but his voice did not sound apologetic. "They are not used to the food of Blackwing's nest." Chapter 175. The elven ambassador did not have time to be sentimental. He had to quickly accept the captives into his camp, so as to give these poor warriors some comfort. There were priests in the diplomatic mission, and they were well prepared. As long as they weren't seriously injured or cursed after treatment and a period of rest, these people who looked abnormally miserable should be able to recover without leaving any major problems. However, after looking for a while and counting the people, Caleb noticed other problems. "Your Majesty, we are extremely grateful for your kindness," the elven ambassador said, "but please allow me to remind you that we still have one more person whose whereabouts are still unknown. These are all the captives in the dungeon." "I understand, Your Majesty." Caleb nodded and continued in a gentle and pleading tone, "But Chimera Magusher brought us news. It said that this is your friend, a fairy, a child of the forest. I wonder if you understand her current situation?" "Luna, I do have such a friend. There was nothing to hide," Caesar said directly. "She is very safe and likes to stay in Blackwing's lair. When Luna wants to return, she will naturally return. Of course, I also hope that Blackwing's lair can form a true friendship with the Elven Forest." The Black Dragon Lord mentioned friendship, hinting at the end of the topic and at the same time indicating that the diplomatic mission could leave. Of course. However, Caleb turned a deaf ear to it and continued to ask, "We have no right to interfere with the freedom of a fairy lady, but she is still a descendant of the Elven Forest. I beg you, Your Majesty, Dragon King, let us meet this lady so that we can tell her situation to the king and her family." In the end, the Taya elves did not believe the Black Dragon's words at all. How could a forest fairy be willing to stay here? They could not understand. "I've said it." The Black Dragon's tone was not as friendly as before. Sharp fangs extended from his mouth, and his voice was almost cold. "She is very safe and does not want to see you." In fact, Caesar did not even tell the little fellow that someone was visiting the Elven Forest. The elf envoy silently pursed his thin lips, which made him look a little hesitant. In fact, the negotiation this time was much smoother than they had imagined. He did not want to complicate things at the end. According to the tone of the Dragon King, he was afraid that it would not relent on this matter. If they continued to pursue it, they were afraid that it would cause the dragon's dissatisfaction and lead to unexpected trouble. Therefore, Caleb could only cower and give in. He no longer wanted to be entangled in this matter. He bid farewell to the Black Dragon Lord and returned to the Elven Forest with the diplomatic group and the captives. At the same time that the Elven diplomatic group returned, Gray and his companions also returned to the northern kingdoms. Of the original 25 people who were full of ambition, only half were left now. However, everyone's hearts were filled with joy. When they had been captured by the terrifying Black Dragon, none of them had thought that they would be able to escape from the evil dragon's clutches so quickly. During one of the shifts between day and night, they seized the opportunity when the battle lizardmen relaxed and escaped in one fell swoop. The return journey was far more difficult than when they came. Fear curled up in their hearts like a poisonous snake. These days, they did not sleep or rest, and while trying their best to escape, they could not help but look back at the forest. They were afraid that the source of their fear would catch up with them and use its sharp teeth and fangs to strangle the lives of these adventurers. Fortunately, they finally came back. The moment they stepped through the border gate of Kaji, everyone could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. Almost all of them collapsed on the ground, exhausted to the point that they almost fainted. After 3 long days of rest, Gray and his companions regained their strength. At the same time, they suddenly realized that they were about to become famous. So far, they were the first and only group of adventurers to enter Blackwing's nest and come out alive. At the same time, as experienced adventurers, they made a detailed record of Blackwing's nest. Although during the time they were thrown into the dungeon, the battle lizardmen confiscated their weapons, armor, and everything that could be exploited, causing them to be naked and could only escape back to the northern kingdoms like savages. However, their memories could not be collected or erased. Regarding the information about Blackwing's nest and the strength of the Dragon King, no one had a deeper understanding than them. Soon, these guys began to sell information about Blackwing's nest, as well as an assessment of the strength of the Black Dragon Lord. Unlike the fake information circulating in the market, Gray and his group were very desperate. They dared to swear to the gods that all of this was true. With this, they immediately distinguished themselves from the merchants who sold false information in the market and attracted a large number of buyers. At the same time, their descriptions made people more aware of the strength of the Black Dragon in the north. Soon, Gray and his group used this information to make a lot of money, and then fled back to the free trade city-state in the central region. As for the idea of exploring Blackwing's nest again, it did not even appear in the minds of these guys. Just thinking about the appearance of the Black Dragon in front of them was enough to make their scalps numb and their guts go cold. That was an extremely old existence, close to an ancient dragon. If they really wanted to take action against it, they might have to mobilize the entire army of the northern kingdoms to rush to Blackwing's nest. In Iradia, unless it was a legendary figure like the King of Mercenaries and his team, ordinary adventurers would not be able to do it. To truly deal with a powerful evil like the Dragon King, they could only rely on a well-organized army. Not only that, it would seem that in a small place like the Northlands, the armies they raised wouldn't be of much use. If they wanted to kill an ancient dragon and its descendants, they would have to send a high-level army like the ones in the trading cities, equipped with magnetic magic statues and magical cannons. What Gray and the others did not know was that their information was only a starting point. After that, the authorized khaki shapeshifters quickly joined in, and with the Brindle family as the driving force behind the scenes, the news about the Dragon King quickly fermented and spread widely. In the end, a mass energy crystal that recorded the appearance of the Black Dragon Lord was added in, pushing the storm to a climax. At this point, the news of the Black Dragon Emperor Caesar Tangerine not only spread among the rulers and adventurers, but also into the streets and alleys, entering the eyes of some civilians and craftsmen. And after this wave of hype, Caesar also got his wish to get his trophy. In the Black Dream, A red gold throne with different ripples flowed into the edge of the darkness. A place, move your body and show your fangs. From now on, you will truly occupy a place in Iradia and become the evil that everyone looks at. Fame is sometimes also power. Reward, body modification, red gold magic resistance. Sure enough, achievements can be obtained by oneself after fumbling around. Caesar took in all of this. His head that was wrapped in dark golden scales moved slightly, and he raised his claws to touch the red gold trophy. In the fine fragments of light, he personally felt the changes in himself. Chapter 176. Crimson Gold-Ranked Magic Resistance. Caesar faced the exploding specks of light and stood there silently, feeling the changes in his body. Before this, he had received a scale modification, Black Jade-Ranked Magic Resistance. That Black Jade-Ranked Magic Resistance had given him an unparalleled magic resistance, giving him a fixed 60% damage reduction. Crimson Gold-Ranked, what would it be like? Caesar did not know. Black Dream had never explained anything to him. He could only study it by himself and try to figure it out when he faced a spellcaster in the future. But no matter what, this reward would not be bad. After all, this was something on the same level as the Bio Boost armor. Caesar was prepared for the sudden appearance of the Crimson Gold Trophy, so he was not too surprised. He calmly left the dark space and planned to see Luna's research on the magic staff spring. Speaking of which, when Black Dragon gave the staff to Luna, the little one immediately showed the same suspicious expression as the little fox. This was because Caesar could not hide it from her. Forest fairies were very sensitive to magical items. Luna could tell at a glance that the spring was made of a young branch of the Tree of Knowledge. This was something from the Elven Forest. For this matter, Luna chased after him for a long time, chirping like a little bird. She circled around Black Dragon, hugging his neck and asking for the truth. Let's move forward a bit. Although they were close neighbors, the Elven Forest was actually quite a distance away from Blackwing's lair. In between, they had to cross a mountain range and cross two streams. Fortunately, there were no ferocious beasts or monsters. In the end, Caleb successfully returned to the Elven Forest and brought back his captured kin. Out of consideration, Caleb asked the diplomatic group to spread the news of their safe return and not return quietly to report to His Majesty the Elven King. Although His Majesty Kasia was the leader, he was too young and had just taken over the throne. Only because he was blessed by the gods, his position was gradually stabilized. However, this did not mean that the Elf King had no competitors. Countless pairs of eyes were staring at this beautiful girl, observing her every move, waiting for her to make a mistake. Caleb wanted to spread the news of his successful return to prove that His Majesty Kasia's negotiation strategy was correct. He wanted to increase the Elven King's influence and eliminate some unstable factors. It was true that the Elven Forest was filled with good people, but the fight for power had nothing to do with good or evil. Upon seeing Caleb, Garcia Yufeng revealed a gentle smile. The melancholy in her eyes due to waiting was swept away. Ambassador Caleb, it's good to see you, especially when I see that you're safe and sound. The Elven King sized him up carefully and did not hide his joy. Thank you for bringing back my people who were in trouble. Also, I hope that the trip to Blackwing's nest will not affect your emotional life. Not at all, Your Majesty. Caleb could not help but feel a little nervous in front of Queen Whisperwind, whom he had always dreamed of meeting. At the same time, he wanted to show off, so he subconsciously exaggerated, "That evil dragon cannot scare me. The Taya elves have always been fearless." Caleb received the Elven King's praise. However, in comparison, Kasia was more concerned about her people who had suffered in the dungeons of Blackwing's nest. Thus, she immediately went to meet them and expressed her sympathy for these pitiful people. Only then did the Elven King realize the problem. Ambassador Caleb, there are a total of 27 of us who are missing, but I only saw 19 of them. Yes, Your Majesty. Caleb's expression turned gloomy. He said in a pained voice, there are still 7 warriors who did not make it back. They will forever remain in Blackwing's nest. We will remember their names. Is that so? Kasia heard this and could not help but sigh. She revealed a look of pity. May the moon goddess guide them, and let their souls return to the divine kingdom. May the moon goddess guide them, Caleb repeated. The chirping of the birds gradually faded away. The forest returned to silence. But Ambassador Caleb, after a long time, the young leader spoke again. Where's the last one? It's that forest sprite. Caleb's tone took a turn for the worse. In his opinion, if Tearope had not acted on her own, things would not have ended up like this. If the black dragon was the main culprit, then Tearope was an accomplice. Because of this, he despised the entire sprite race. Did you see her? No. The other party said that they would ensure her safety. At the same time, they said that the sprites did not want to see us. I can't guess the dragon's intentions. It seems that their relationship is unfathomable. The jade crown on Kasia's head reflected the sunset glow. From Magus Hill's description, she might really be the black dragon's friend. Caleb said, associating with evil is no different from falling into evil. This was not his original words, but a concept passed down by the previous elven king. Kasia thought for a moment and asked, You have personally come into contact with the black dragon. Do you think it is evil? Caleb replied without hesitation. Yes, that dragon is crude and ferocious. It is extremely irritable and greedy. It is the standard evil creature. Is that true? Kasia looked at him with a smile and looked into the eyes of the elven envoy. But Magus Hill seems to have a completely different view from you. When Chimera returned, although she did not say anything good about the black dragon, she did not say anything bad about it either. After all, the other party was a Penishade dragon. Magus Hill's behavior was enough to explain many things. All right. As you said, I can't come to a conclusion. Under the clear gaze of King Whisperer, Caleb gave in. I admit that it is indeed different from the other Penishade dragons. However, this does not prove that the black dragon is not evil. You are right. Kasia nodded and looked at the rippling lake. That is why I am preparing to go to the Blackwing's nest to see it with my own eyes. No, even Caleb did not know why he had spoken to Kasia in such a strong tone. He immediately realized his mistake and half knelt in front of the Elf King. Your Majesty, please forgive me for speaking out of turn, but you are the leader of the elf forest. You should not be involved in this matter. This is not a joke. I know. Kasia's voice was as calm as ever. He was not affected by the elven envoy's offense. However, I have a reason to go and see it. One of our people is trapped in the Blackwing's nest. We must ensure her safety and ensure her freedom. For a mere forest sprite, due to his strong emotions, Caleb used words that were obviously biased. You do not have to put yourself in danger for a fallen fairy that is allied with an evil dragon. Your Majesty, that evil dragon is unimaginably powerful. Even if you are favored by the moon god, you are not its match. This was an unspoken message. Caleb did not say it directly. Kasia's tone became slightly more serious. He warned him, do not be so subjective. Envoy Caleb, we cannot be sure that she was willing to stay by the black dragon's side. Perhaps Miss Luna was coerced. In this regard, Mr. Tearope and Miss Prin share the same opinion as me. Chapter 177. Even so, it's not worth it. Caleb looked at Emperor Windwhisper's flawless face and pleaded, You don't have to put yourself in danger for a forest sprite that might be kidnapped and enslaved. Your Majesty, if you insist, I think we have many other ways. Ambassador Caleb, do you think it's not worth it? Garcia tilted his head and grasped the crux of the problem. Why? Your Majesty. The elven messenger pursed his lips and paused for a moment. In the end, he decided to throw caution to the wind and spoke his true thoughts. The forest fairies rely on our protection to survive. They can neither fight nor produce. They are of no value to the elven forest. You should not risk the safety of the leader for a single forest fairy. Kasia frowned and her amber eyes trembled. She seemed to be puzzled by the elf ambassador's words. Caleb, Do you really think so? The male elf didn't answer. He fell into silence and expressed his attitude. Caleb, you are right. The forest sprites can't fight or produce. They are indeed worthless, Kezia admitted, but then she changed the topic. But there are many things that can't be measured by value. Back then, we followed the ancient oath and moved here. We set up camp in the remote and barren north of Iradia. Our ancestors swore that we would never leave each other and live together hand in hand. Now, everyone here is our family, relatives, and close friends. Caleb, if we measure our people based on value, we will soon betray our oath and abandon our traditions. We will divide our people. We will force them to have different ranks and ranks. At that time, the strong will be able to order the weak around, and the weak will have to listen to the strong and bend their knees. By then, we will break away from them. We will lose them. We will be no different from humans. Everything that we have stood for since ancient times will no longer exist. Kezia didn't blame him. She spoke as if she was chatting with friends. She looked at Caleb's face with sincerity in her eyes. The elf messenger lowered his head. Emperor Euphone was younger than him, but what he said made him blush. He was too ashamed to show his face. After a while, Caleb said in a voice as soft as a cat, I understand, your majesty. I will repent of my mistakes under the oak tree. You don't have to do that, Ambassador Caleb. Kezia responded with a gentle smile. She bent down slightly, and her silver-white hair fell over her shoulders. She helped the embarrassed Taya elf up. I also want you to go and find Mr. Tierope and Ms. Balinway. You want to? The physical contact made Caleb's cheeks turn red. I will take them with me. Of course, the two children of the forest's safety. Back to the present. The greater the reputation of the five-colored evil dragons, the more likely they were to be harassed by adventurers, attacked by righteous people, and attacked by armies. Of course, their reputation wasn't without benefits. Usually, powerful and famous five-colored dragons would more or less attract evil creatures to join them. For example, Sylvia, the mother of Poison's influence, had expanded rapidly, and now, Blackwing's lair had truly welcomed a powerful heretic to join them. However, what surprised Caesar was that this fellow was actually not a member of the Aberration clan, but a human, a spellcaster, a wizard. Supreme Emperor, my name is Ryan. I have followed your footsteps and prayed for the protection of your unparalleled power. For this, I am willing to offer my loyalty to you. This was a wizard covered in a black robe. His voice was hoarse, and his body was thin. Caesar couldn't help but think of the old leader of the Stone Crow clan, Save. It was worth mentioning that this guy had some background. The moment he opened his mouth, his presence couldn't be ignored. This was because he spoke in the Draconic language. His pronunciation was clear, and his pronunciation was perfect. And Dragon King, in the Draconic language, meant emperor. Caesar, I'm a little scared of this person. Even Lunas said so. Is that so? He smiled and comforted her. In the Emerald Palace, the black dragon's deep red pupils began to focus. Scan analysis result. Compound life form, carbon-based, energy body, comprehensive combat ability verification. 324. 353. This value was about the equivalent of an adult green dragon. In a poor and remote place like the northern Lydia, this was already considered a high-end combat ability. At the very least, the skeletal dragon Angramo wasn't a match for this guy. Hog, who was wielding a legendary weapon, might not be able to defeat him either. But against the Black Dragon Lord, this wasn't enough. Moreover, this guy was a spellcaster. The Black Dragon exhaled 2 thick streams of white air from his nostrils. He perched on the high platform of the Emerald Palace and looked down at the humanoid creature below. He said, Outsider, raise your head and face me. Hearing this person who had entered the Black Wing's nest alone slowly raised his head, allowing the Black Dragon Lord who was looking down at him to see his true appearance. Oh, who? The little fellow was the first to make a sound. She only took a glance before hiding behind the Black Dragon's armor with a whoosh. Her little heart was thumping, and she was quite frightened. This guy wasn't human at all. Under the cover of the pitch-black robe, there was a half-decayed face. The left side of the outsider's face was that of a normal human, while the right side was that of a sharp, pale skull. Blue flames flashed in the empty eye sockets. He looked up at the Black Dragon Lord, and the left side of his face squeezed out an extremely ugly smile. This was a lich who had either been half-transformed or had failed the transformation. The Black Dragon tilted his head and twisted his neck. After dealing with evil creatures for a long time, he had already developed an immunity to all kinds of monsters. Moreover, this dragon had even come into contact with that abnormally vicious and indescribable small statue, so he naturally wouldn't be intimidated by a failed lich. Interesting. Caesar let out a mischievous laugh. I think you're not here to seek the loyalty of a true dragon. For someone like you, loyalty isn't worth mentioning. Speak, why are you here? His powerful strength gave him the confidence to face such a monstrous creature. If he was willing, at this distance, Caesar only needed to use dustless land to instantly crush it. Emperor, I came from a free trade city-state in the central region and stayed here, praying for the protection of your unparalleled power. As long as you agree, I'm willing to offer my true loyalty. The half-lich named Ren didn't move his mouth, but his voice was transmitted through the soul. They had been conversing in dragon language, but this guy's previous life wasn't a dragon, but a human, showing his rich knowledge. So, you're saying that you fled here? Caesar hit the nail on the head and exposed him without any mercy. At the same time, he casually asked, "Then tell me, what did you provoke? It wasn't enough for you to flee to the north with your tail between your legs. You even need to seek the protection of an evil dragon." Chapter 178. Your eyes are sharper than a giant eagle's, Your Majesty. The Demolic complimented. It squatted down, its black robe draped over the ground, and looked up to speak frankly. My enemy, John Arthur, is Tarshimu's lackey, the king of Kolar. Kolar, like Elantra, which Caesar had impersonated when he infiltrated the humans, was one of the 9 free trade city-states in the central region. Although they all worshipped Tarshimu as their leader, each city had its own master. The John Arthur that the Demolic was talking about was the ruler of Kolar for the past 20 years. That person did not have a title, but was known as the king of Kolar. Caesar knew about the city of Kolar, but he didn't know who John Arthur was. However, he didn't delve too deeply into this matter. Maintaining his dignity as the master of Blackwing's nest, he changed the topic and asked with interest, "Let me hear it. What evil have you done?" For a spellcaster who studies necromancy, living is evil, Ryan replied with a bitter voice. The Radiant Holy Knights will only uphold their so-called justice and judge the evil in their eyes. They swore to take my life and will not rest until they are dead. That's hard to say. The entrenched evil dragon was not moved by the Demolic's emotions at all. Instead, it sneered, and then its voice grew louder. "Speak, mage. What evil have you done? Just for the lives of a few normal people and a few insignificant corpses, John Arthur took away everything that I loved." The Demolic paused for a moment, and when it saw that the Black Dragon King was unmoved, it had no choice but to admit. Of course, I wanted to take it away from him. It had a sorrowful and indignant look, as if it was still tormented by the pain at that time. Caesar clicked his tongue in wonder, amazed by this fellow's worldview. However, he was an evil dragon, and would not reject a spellcaster with rich knowledge because of this. Thus, the Black Dragon Lord asked, "They chased you all the way to the north?" "No, I shook them off for the time being," Ryan said as he leaned on his staff. The key point of this sentence was the word temporarily, and then he continued to speak. Ever since then, the evil necromancer began a long period of exile, and John Arthur's minions were always on his tail. From Koar to Olanda, from Olanda to the unfallen empire, and then back to the 9 great trade city-states. He drifted and was hated by everyone. In the end, the Demolic who had failed to transform came to the northern kingdoms. He stepped into the uninhabited land and went deep into Blackwing's lair, directly arriving in front of the Dragon King. Mage. After listening to him, Caesar moved his body, which had curled up into a ball on the high platform, and walked down step by step. He looked down at the heretic who was seeking protection. You have to understand what it means to pledge your loyalty to me. The Black Dragon has never been a fool that can be fooled. Don't hope that you can treat us the same way you treat the Red Dragon. If you dare to be disloyal, hide, or deceive us, don't expect me to be as merciful as those humans. Anyone who had seen the face of the Black Dragon Lord would be shocked, regardless of whether it was a human or a true dragon. Fortunately, the Demolic had seen the mass energy crystal circulating in the northern kingdoms before and had come for it, so it did not show any fear or make any embarrassing moves. However, looking directly at such a powerful evil dragon, the pupils of its human face on the left trembled slightly. I understand, Your Majesty, Ryan replied softly. Ryan replied in a low voice. The Black Dragon Overlord released his draconic might, and a terrifying aura surged forth like a tsunami, forcing the Demolic to lower his head. The soul fire that was originally floating in his eye sockets was deeply suppressed. Very good, mage. Caesar showed a satisfied smile, but the Black Dragon's face did not look like he was smiling at all. It was because he opened his mouth to reveal his sharp teeth that made him look even more ferocious. If that's the case, you have to follow the rules of Blackwing's lair, Hog, he growled. At your command, Your Majesty. The leader of the gnolls immediately came out from the shadows in the corner of the palace, holding a shining short axe in its hand. Let this mage live in the slums at the edge of Blackwing's lair. Yes, the place where the kobolds live. At the same time, tell him about the rules of Blackwing's lair. Caesar said that Blackwing's lair had a strict hierarchy that would not change based on the strength of outsiders. Newcomers, regardless of whether they were humans or other creatures, were of the lowest class. Even if spellcasters were important, the Black Dragon Lord would not allow them to enter the core area or even the Emerald Palace. That was a place where only special clans could stay. The outsiders had to endure the continuous exploitation of Blackwing's nest and prove their worth. Only then would they have a chance to be promoted and improve their poor living conditions. This was not beneficial to Caesar's recruitment of foreign clans, but it was important for the stability of his rule. Actually, there's another reason why the Demolic Ryan had been reduced to living with the kobolds. This damned fellow had scared Luna. Understand. Hogg glanced at the frightening Demolic, turned around, and took the lead to walk out of the Emerald Palace. Please allow me to leave, Your Majesty. Ren nodded. The Demolic, who was used to living in the dark and gloomy places, did not have any requirements. He did not care what he lived with. His only goal was to obtain the protection of the powerful evil dragon. Following behind the leader of the gnolls, he noticed that Hogg's weapon was not an ordinary item. It was a legendary weapon with great power. Ryan remembered that the last time he had seen such a thing was on the so-called king of Khal, Joffrey Arthur. What? Legendary weapons were so common in the north that even the leader of the gnolls had the right to use it? Ryan did not believe it. Furthermore, this fellow actually dared to use this item in front of a greedy Penishade dragon. Obviously, he had the tacit approval of the Black Dragon Emperor. Furthermore, this legendary item was a weapon that the Black Dragon Emperor had bestowed upon his own kin. After thinking about this problem, the Demolic's suspicious and sensitive heart trembled slightly. Of course, he did not sincerely want to join the Dragon King. His original plan was to hide under the protection of the powerful evil dragon for a period of time and wait for a few years until the situation calmed down and the pursuers gave up on the search. Then he would find a chance to escape. But now, Ryan had changed his mind. He wanted to find out more about the situation in Blackwing's lair and evaluate the Dragon King's potential before deciding whether to pledge loyalty. Outsider, let me warn you first. After arriving at their destination, the strong gnoll turned around and said in an unfriendly tone, "The first rule of His Majesty's band is that you are not allowed to harm any living creatures in Blackwing's lair. You are allowed to research necromancy, but if you violate the ban, we will break your bones. Please do not worry." The Demolic nodded. He did not look at the gnoll, but looked at the surroundings instead. His attitude was not very polite. It's good that you remember. Hogg continued, because you have to remember every single one of them clearly. Chapter 179. This time, the Elven Forest diplomatic party was much quieter than before. There were only 50 of them, but they were much more powerful than before. They were made up of archmages, paladins, elven rangers, and chastising hunters that the Taya elves were proud of. The warm winds of the north blew against the white flags that were held high above their heads. The flags were embroidered with the lush rainforest and mountains of the Elven Forest. The drawings were so detailed that one could see the lush scenery of their homeland. Garcia Whisperwind was among them. Not long after, the Elven Forest paid a second visit to Blackwing's lair. The Elven King personally led a group of people to negotiate with the Dragon King. They were trying to find a way to retrieve the forest fairies that were trapped in the evil dragon's territory. For this, Garcia even brought along Luna's parents, who were not good at fighting. If the Black Dragon Lord was indeed different from the rest, and was friends with the children of the forest as he claimed, then he would not stop Luna from seeing her parents. However, if he lied, Garcia would have to strongly request that the Black Dragon return the forest fairies' freedom. The Elven Forest would not hesitate to use force. It was not that the forest fairies were so precious and important, but this issue was related to the Elven Forest's way of doing things. In the rescue team that had gone to Blackwing's nest, there were 7 brave and passionate people who had been forced to fall into eternal slumber there. Although the Elven Forest was angry, considering that they had indeed snuck in and entered Blackwing's nest without permission and had made a small mistake first, it was difficult for them to make things difficult for them. Moreover, the neighboring Dragon King had explained that it was a misunderstanding and was willing to return the captives. Although this was not enough to appease the Elven Forest's elders, it was hard for them to find a reason to make things difficult. They could only keep their displeasure to themselves. Luna was different. The forest fairies might still be alive and might be enslaved by the Black Dragon Lord. The Elven Forest people could not ignore this situation. They had to find her and bring her back. The reason why the Elven Forest, which did not care about worldly affairs, was able to stand tall in the northern lands of Aladia, and why even the old green dragon, which had expanded to the point of no end, did not extend its claws and fangs to this place. This was because of the Elven Forest's unity and unyielding way of doing things. In fact, regarding the proposal to head to Blackwing's nest again and prepare to use military force, the people of the Elven Forest were all in favor of it. They were only against their own leader, His Majesty the Elven King, personally paying a visit and stepping into the heart of Blackwing's nest. But then, the objectors immediately shut their mouths. That was because Kasia had proven her strength. This Elven King, who was favored by the moon god Serene, was stronger than any of the strongest people in the Elven Forest, including those old and old-fashioned elders. When they arrived at the edge of Blackwing's lair, Caesar had just woken up from his sleep. Although he had slept for 3 years, the growth of his body had not stopped. He was still slowly transforming. Why are they here again? After hearing the news, Caesar shook his head and grabbed a handful of gems and threw them into his mouth. After the previous visit, he had really intended to build a bridge of communication with the Elven Forest people. He was prepared to send an envoy over in 2 days. The candidates had already been decided. They were made up of wild boar people and demon hounds. When the time came, he would return the favor and send some specialties of Blackwing's lair, such as Mammon lizard eggs and steel beef bacon. However, he did not expect the other party to arrive first. Do I have to send more gifts? Caesar closed the door of the treasury and locked it. Then he crawled out a little and squatted at the edge of the treetop fortress. He looked down and observed the people who had arrived. There were many familiar faces in the group, including the elven envoy Caleb, the chimera Magusher who had been beaten up, and the high-level spellcaster who had caught Caesar's attention. However, it could be seen at a glance that these people were not the main characters today. The real important person was the Tia elf who walked at the front of the group. She was accompanied by 2 sacred warriors who were at the peak of their mental strength and strength. She was a female elf. Her skin was very white, and her figure was slender and elegant. She wore a brocade silver dress that reached her knees, and a crown made of Yanan flowers and embellished with green jade and agate. Apart from that, there were no other accessories on her body. However, her beauty was not inferior to any of the princesses of noble birth. Silver-haired, long legs. Unfortunately, with Caesar's aesthetic standards, he could only remember these two vulgar and boorish characteristics. The black dragon poked his head out slightly. As he sized up the elven envoy slowly approached. Then Caesar raised his head and gestured for the wyvern leader, Silly Husky, to let these people in. Be it Blackwing's lair or the elven forest, neither of them had learned from the humans where someone would loudly recite the names of the other party before they met. Thus, the treetop fortress was as quiet as ever until the elven diplomatic party approached. Greetings, Mr. Magusher. We meet again. The black dragon lord walked down from the tree and took the initiative to speak. He let out an ambiguous laugh from his dragon throat as he sized up the chimera. At the same time, he glanced at the elf envoy Caleb, but did not greet the elf. Seeing Caesar's red vertical eyes, the chimera's 3 heads subconsciously shrank back. It was obvious that the misunderstanding from the last time they met had left a deep impression on it. Magusher was slow for a moment before he spoke to the black dragon timidly. Greetings, master of Blackwing's lair. Greetings, powerful dragon king. At this time, Caleb took 2 steps forward and took the initiative to speak first. We have come again only to allow the elven forest and Blackwing's lair to form a true friendship. For this, we have decided to show you our full sincerity. Please allow me to introduce. He took a step to the right to make space. He stepped forward with his left foot and placed his right hand on his abdomen. At the same time, he bowed and brushed his left arm. Using slow movements to show his respect, the common leader of the millions of people in the elven forest, the son of dawn, the chosen one, His Majesty Elven King Garcia, Whisperwind. TSK. Is he learning from the humans of the northern kingdoms? What a foolish etiquette. Caesar was too preoccupied with looking at the elven envoy's flirtatious gestures with a gaze full of mockery that he didn't even hear what the envoy said. Thus, the black dragon didn't respond in a short period of time. Greetings, Dragon King. Fortunately, Garcia spoke in time, preventing the entire place from falling into an awkward silence. Her voice was very pleasant, like the tinkling of melting snow, like pearls falling on a jade plate. Please allow me to lead everyone here. Beside me are all my brave people. They wish to see the traces of the great true dragon. I believe that someone as powerful as you would not mind such trivial matters. Chapter 180. Of course I don't mind. Caesar lowered his head slightly, but his tall body allowed him to look down at the Taya elf who was looking at him calmly. Elven Queen? She didn't look like one at all. Instead, she looked like a beautiful young lady. It seemed that their queen Whisperwind rarely showed herself in the outside world, and humans didn't know about her. Otherwise, the days in the elven forest wouldn't be as peaceful as they were now. Immediately after, the assessment device gave Caesar a direct answer as to why this young lady was the leader of the elven forest. Scan analysis result: carbon-based life form. Overall combat ability assessment: 329 to 561. Garcia's lowest ability assessment was about the same as the half-fliches who had joined Blackwing's nest some time ago. However, her upper limit was unexpectedly high, far exceeding the limit that normal creatures could reach. Was it because she was favored by the gods? Caesar guessed. Speaking of which, he was quite envious of the lucky ones who were favored by the gods. Ever since the Underdark, the Black Dragon would occasionally murmur the name of the evil Dragon Mother. Unfortunately, the Dragon Queen did not pay attention to this fellow who lived in a remote and desolate place, nor did she bestow any benefits to him. All right, I'll remember this grudge. Thank you for your generosity. Jesse smiled gently in return. Your Excellency, I believe that both your time and mine is precious. Although he was surrounded by powerful and kind creatures and only had 6 flying dragons around him, the Black Dragon Lord still had the upper hand in terms of aura. Even with the dimensional suppression, he was still intimidating. Caesar raised his steel-like chin and said casually, "So, please state your intentions. We're here for the child of the forest." Garcia understood the straightforwardness of the Black Dragon. She was young and could quickly adapt to the way the Tia elves spoke. She changed and went straight to the point. "As you know, Miss Luna is a member of our race and an indispensable part of the elven forest. We have to ensure her safety." Caesar's expression turned ugly. He didn't look at the elven lady anymore. Instead, he shifted his gaze to Caleb and Chimera Magusher, his eyes filled with coldness. "Didn't I mention it before? Luna is safe. She's fine and doesn't want to see you." Caesar waved his paw dispiritedly, obviously unwilling to talk about it. "So please go back. If the little guy wants to go home at any time, I won't stop him." As he said that, he prepared to walk back. These kind creatures were not weak in battle and could pose a certain threat to him. Unfortunately, they were not strong enough and did not have much authority in front of the Black Dragon Lord. "Please don't say that." Kasia was still smiling. She turned her body slightly, revealing her slender and tight calves as she waved to the back. The 2 forest fairies were pushed to the front by the Elf King, a male and a female. In this situation, they were a little uneasy. Facing the Black Dragon Lord, who was like a mountain to them, the fairies were even more terrified. Caesar's footsteps paused as he was about to leave. He lowered his head again and looked at these little guys with interest. After all, this was the first time he saw a creature like Luna. Forest fairies were generally only 30 centimeters tall. It was hard to tell the difference between them without looking carefully. But why did these Taya elves bring these 2 fairies? Could it be that they wanted to predict the draconic magic and deal with him like how they dealt with the true dragon? Caesar was a little confused. Faced with the stare of the Black Dragon's crimson eyes, the 2 forest fairies were a little flustered. They couldn't help but show a helpless expression on their faces. "Don't be afraid." Kasia comforted them. She then looked up and whispered to the Black Dragon Lord, "These are Miss Luna's parents." Thunder on the flat ground. In the next moment, Caesar's expression froze. What? "These are Luna's parents," Kasia repeated. Garcia repeated and then added, "Miss Luna's relationship with her parents is very good. I believe she won't refuse a visit from her parents." "I think, yes." At this moment, the master of Blackwing's lair, Dragon King, Emperor Caesar Odoranzo Tangerine, revealed an expression like a cat caught stealing a fish. This time, it was his turn to be uneasy. However, Caesar was Caesar after all. His reflexes were unparalleled in the world. The subtle expression that flashed across his dragon face was unfathomable. He quickly regained his serious demeanor and let out a series of laughter. "Yes, I believe Miss Luna will be very happy." Actually, the wyvern leader was right beside him, but he still turned his head away. "I permit you to enter my treasury and invite Miss Luna over. Tell her that her friends are here to visit." The wyverns spread their wings and flew towards the Emerald Palace. Caesar turned back and smiled once more. His attitude was much better than before. However, due to his voice, this fellow's laughter sounded very sinister no matter how one listened to it. It was all the more frightening and made the couple even more uneasy. Soon, the wyvern leader turned back and brought the little fellow back to the clearing at the edge of the treetop fortress. "Caesar, you're not letting me sleep again." Luna came down from the husky's head sleepily and climbed onto Caesar's back with great familiarity. It was the little fellow's afternoon nap time. Normally, she would be sleeping in the little house in the Emerald Palace at this time. "Cough, someone's here to see you." Caesar was a little guilty as he turned his head and whispered to her. "Ugh." The little fellow rubbed her sleepy eyes and climbed up from his back to Caesar's head. Only then did she truly reveal herself and look forward. At the same time she saw the couple also saw her. "Father, mother?" Luna was completely awake in an instant. She was inexplicably shocked, but the next second she immediately became guilty like Caesar. My child, Madame Bailon Wei could not help but sob. Although they had heard the conversation between the black dragon and their daughter, the parents still subconsciously ignored it and thought that their daughter must have been kidnapped and coerced. Bailon Wei quickly approached and wanted to hug her child, but stopped halfway because she saw the ferocious black dragon below Luna with its fangs exposed. She was afraid that would be angered and cause the terrifying five-color dragon to do something terrible. In the end, Luna took the initiative to jump down and get close to her mother. Only then could they hug each other. At this time, Garcia Yufeng also heaved a sigh of relief. In fact, even if Luna was coerced, it did not matter. They would save their people. What she was most afraid of was that the Black Dragon Lord had lied, and the truth was that Miss Luna had already gone to the Kingdom of God. That was the most unacceptable because Luna's parents were here. They would probably collapse at the news of their beloved daughter's death. Fortunately, everything was clear now. After confirming that there were no illusions or enchantment spells around, the Elven Queen was completely relieved. The creatures of the Elven Forest advocated peace. If it was not necessary, they would never take the initiative to start a war with humans or other creatures. Chapter 181. Caesar had a friendly discussion with the visiting Elven King and allowed the Elven diplomatic group to stay for a day. However, in the end, they still took the little fellow away. This was the request of Luna's parents. Caesar could not stop them, nor did he intend to. At this point, the Black Dragon no longer restricted the little fairy's freedom. If the little fellow wanted to return home for a period of time, she could do so at any time. Before leaving, Luna stuck close to his scales as usual, chattering endlessly in the Black Dragon's ears for a long time before reluctantly coming down from Caesar's neck. At the same time, she promised him that she would return in a month or two at most. After all, the little fellow did not stay by the Black Dragon's side for long this time. After she returned the last time, Caesar had entered a 3-year-long slumber midway, so the time they spent together was even less. It's fine, go on. In this regard, Caesar did not feel much sorrow at parting. He could understand the familial feelings of these kind-hearted creatures. Moreover, the Elven Forest was not far from Blackwing's lair, and the two places could be visited at any time. Luna's mood was a little too heavy. This time, the Elven King Kasia was personally receiving them, so Caesar did not have to worry about the little fellow's safety. He could let her go. After that, their Emperor Yufeng also came to bid farewell to the Black Dragon Lord. In a short day of meeting, the two sides did not come to any agreement. However, Kasia was secretly worried about the powerful Dragon King, so she proposed some conceptual agreements to Caesar, such as harmonious coexistence and equal assistance. In this regard, the Black Dragon did not care too much and casually dealt with it, reaching a weak verbal agreement with her. Seeing the Elven diplomatic group disappear from his sight, Caesar turned his head and said to the Wyvern Dragon leader, who had been following behind him like a docile kitten, "Husky, go find that mage." After Luna left, Caesar immediately threw himself into the role of the Black Dragon Lord. With the addition of the Demolic Leon, many of his plans that could not be carried out due to the lack of spellcasters in Blackwing's nest could now be put on the agenda. "At your command, your majesty." The half-liches quickly arrived and half-knelt in front of the Black Dragon Lord. In the past few days, it had studied the ecology of the Blackwing clan and discovered that this place was indeed different from the others. The legendary Dragon King not only had a different appearance from other true dragons, but also had a different way of thinking. Any Pinochet dragon species would not be able to implement such strict class control within their own territories. Even if some of them were smart enough to come up with such an idea, they would not be able to truly implement or maintain such a high-pressure standard. This had to do with their nature. With the lazy nature of the Pinochet dragons, they would never spend so much effort to keep an eye on matters related to dependence. However, in the Blackwing clan, the creatures here strictly followed these rules. They were just like humans. This was unbelievable to Ryan. It could be seen that the Black Dragon Emperor's ambition was beyond imagination. Mage! After the half-liches finished explaining the greeting etiquette, Caesar said, "If a true dragon's corpse was placed in front of you now, how would you deal with it?" Ryan was stunned for a moment. He did not know why the Black Dragon Emperor would ask such a question. Could it be that he was interested in necromancy? Or did he want to consider his own knowledge? "Necromancy dragon, your majesty." Although the half-liches did not understand, they still answered, "If it is a true dragon's corpse that retains the essence of magic, I will turn it into a necromancy dragon." "You have this ability?" Caesar was slightly surprised. He remembered that the Black Knight had once told him that the necromancy dragon was the best way to make use of a true dragon that had died. Its value was much higher than that of a corpse dragon. However, it would require a high-level necromancer to spend a lot of effort to control it. Moreover, it would cause a huge commotion and attract attention. The commotion mentioned here was not referring to the sound or vision produced when creating the necromancy dragon. Instead, it was referring to the fact that such a high-level undead creature would attract the attention of the gods when it was just born. In particular, some of the chaotic gods who had been paying attention to the descendants of the undead would be able to detect it. This requires the help of some external objects and offerings, but it is not difficult. "I think it is possible," Ryan said. The half-liches were smart and sensitive. After the Black Dragon asked again, they immediately realized the crux of the problem and became excited. The Dragon King might really have a true dragon's corpse in his hands. "No." The dark red eyes flashed. Caesar considered for a moment and gave up on this plan. Instead, he asked, "Is it possible to use the true dragon's blood to baptize and give other creatures the dragon's bloodline?" The necromancy dragon was indeed powerful. An old green dragon like Sylvia would not be much weaker than when she was alive once the transformation was successful. However, putting aside the hidden danger of the enmity of the gods and true dragons, the current Black Wing's nest did not need to be supplemented with top-notch combat power. One Caesar was enough. Its shortcoming was its own mid-level strength. As time passed, regardless of whether it was Gaul, Hog, or Nero, they were gradually unable to keep up with the needs of the expansion of their forces. In the situation where the skeleton dragon Angramo was alone on the other side, these loyal clan leaders were the true mainstays of Blackwing's nest. After all, Caesar couldn't do everything by himself. He wanted to raise the middle and upper echelons of the Blackwing clan. Yes, the half-liches considered for a moment and nodded. Then, they added, "However, there are many restrictions. First, we have to look at the power of the true dragon's blood in the dead dragon's body. We also have to consider the ability of the person to be bestowed. The more powerful the person to be bestowed, the higher the requirement for the quality of the true dragon's blood." "Have you seen the demon dog leader?" Caesar mentioned a clan leader that was more representative. "Yes. What kind of dragon's blood does it need?" "Demon dog descendants. They already have the purgatory bloodline. If we want to bestow them with the dragon bloodline." Ren thought for a moment and said earnestly, "Then we need the true blood of at least a mature dragon. If it's the red dragon, it might be more compatible with them." "Is that so?" Caesar grinned and said, "I am very satisfied with your answer, mage." The Black Dragon was originally a little worried that Sylvia's true blood would not be enough, but now it seemed that it was more than enough. He did not think that an old dragon was already very rare and powerful in Iradia. "It is my honor to serve you, your majesty," Ren said humbly. Ren humbly said, the longer he interacted with the Black Dragon Emperor, the more he could feel how powerful it was. This made the Demolic even more cautious. "Follow me, mage." Caesar turned his head, and his tail turned in an arc. He began to walk back. The Black Dragon treasury was in the deepest part of the Emerald Palace, and the passage was abnormally wide. The translucent walls reflected the enormous Black Dragon and the insignificant mage. On the left and right were pairs of stone pillars that extended all the way into the depths of the palace. Unlike the scorching heat of the northern lands, the Emerald Palace was always cold. The Black Dragon Emperor did not speak along the way, and Ren did not ask either. He silently followed behind until the end. Creak! Caesar opened the door to the treasury. This place was actually not much smaller than the main hall of the Emerald Palace. It was filled with mountains of gold, silver, and gems. There were also magical items placed on crystal decorations, as well as some spread-out murals and handicrafts. They also looked expensive and were made by famous masters. "Don't look, Ren Shamir." Ren warned himself and forcefully suppressed the fluctuations of his soul fire. He lowered his eyes and did not look at the dazzling array of valuable items. It should be noted that all the realms, and all the realms, no matter what kind of true dragon they were, regarded their treasures as their exclusive property. A single glance from any true dragon could lead to a thunderous fury and an extremely tragic end. Ren had no choice but to be cautious. Caesar turned around and glanced at the half-liches. His dark red vertical eyes were shining, and he was expressionless. He repeated, "Mage, follow me." The Black Dragon Emperor continued to walk deeper into the treasury. Chapter 182. When the door opened this time, there was a hazy white mist in front of his eyes, and a surge of cold air blew against his face. But the Demolika's vision would not be affected by this. Through the gaps between the Black Dragon's huge body and through the layers of cold smoke, Ryan saw what was inside. It was a dragon, a dead dragon. Sylvia was wrapped in ice, still maintaining the state she was in before she died. Her eyes were wide open. Her expression was ferocious, and there were a few bloody holes in her abdomen that were thicker than a human's thigh. It was a shocking sight. But this was not the crux of her death. The real fatal wound was on her neck, which was now showing a strange curve. Caesar could not sense it, but the Demolik was very clear. He could sense the powerful magic power in the old green dragon's body. Even if this dead dragon was covered in ice, the surroundings still rippled with the power it had when it was alive. There was no doubt that it was powerful. Ryan concluded that if this dragon did not fall into eternal slumber, he would not be its opponent in a one-on-one fight. His soul flame would be annihilated and completely crushed. But now, this green dragon could only be displayed in the Black Dragon Emperor's treasury for people to admire. The dragon's blood would be used to water the Dragon King's servants. How is it, mage? Caesar rubbed his chin. The sound of metal rubbing against metal was frighteningly loud. He looked up and down at the beautiful and clean ice sculpture and asked, "This green dragon, how many of its kin can it give the dragon's bloodline?" "It depends on your needs, your majesty." The Demolik carefully said, "The dragon's blood baptism is not a simple concept. The dragon's bloodline given is also divided into many levels, from incomplete to perfect. All of them are calculated according to the highest standard of dragon's blood baptism. This, at most 10 people, your majesty. Also, dragon's blood alone is not enough to complete such a complicated baptism. Many other supplementary materials are also needed." Ryan expressed, "It's enough," Caesar thought as he waved his huge right forelimb. Not all clan leaders needed to be upgraded. Functional clans, such as the Boar Men, Ankegs, and Shapeshifters, did not need such a baptism. It would be a waste to do so. "Can be used on undead creatures?" Caesar asked. Ryan's eyes lit up and his soul flame rose. He thought that the Dragon King was going to give him such a gift. But this emotional fluctuation only appeared for a moment, and the blue flame in his eye sockets returned to silence. "I'm afraid that's not possible, your majesty. The undead creatures do not rely on flesh and blood to survive." "Indeed," Caesar nodded and ordered, "Get ready. If you need any materials, ask Hog. Oh, that knoll. He'll take care of it for you." Of course, Hog alone could not solve it, but as the current manager of Blackwing's Nest, Caesar gave the Knoll leader the right to use the wealth of the treasury. Through the channels of the humans in Khaki territory, the problem of the seasoning for the dragon's blood baptism should not be difficult to solve. "Yes, your majesty." Ryan nodded and left the Emerald Palace at Caesar's signal. Not long after the Demolik left, the Knoll leader came to see him. The Black Dragon thought that Hog came to ask about the dragon's blood baptism, but it turned out that was not the case. "Your Majesty." Hog came in and knelt on one knee on the ground. He said to the Black Dragon Lord, who was about to take a nap, "I think there's something I should tell you now." Caesar did not reply. Instead, he carefully looked to the Gnoll leader. Hog had been with him for 10 years. According to the dragon's concept of time, this was an extremely short period of time. But to the Gnolls, this was a very long period of time. As a subspecies of the Iradia, the Gnolls had a strong reproductive ability and a ridiculously short growth period. At the same time, their lifespan was also very short. Under normal circumstances, Gnolls who were over 35 years old were already very long-lived. Although Hog was very talented, his body was still strong and energetic, but he still could not break through this limit. Caesar could clearly see the traces left by time on his body. The towering black mane on the Gnoll leader's back had now turned into mottled light gray. He did not have much time left. "I have to carry out the dragon's blood baptism as soon as possible." Caesar thought that the dragon's bloodline would not only give the clan leaders great power, but also change their life attributes and transform them into long-lived species. The only drawback was that whether it was humans or other strange beasts, they could only carry out the dragon's blood baptism once and be given a dragon's bloodline. The dragon's bloodline given by the dead dragon had no room for improvement. This meant that from then on, their upper limit had been completely locked. Therefore, Caesar did not take Luna into account. Various thoughts passed through his mind. Looking at Hog, who had been kneeling on one knee in silence, Caesar came back to his senses and said, "Tell me, what's wrong? You must remember that 3 years ago, you asked me to keep an eye on a gnome, a battle lizard man, and a group of wolf cubs who were escorting them." Hog said in a low voice and looked up at the curled-up Black Dragon Lord. Seeing Caesar nodding, he continued, "Now, they have some problems." "What problems?" "During the time when you were asleep, the gnome and the battle lizardman's living conditions did not change, but they slowly entered a state of talking to themselves. Later, they began to become irritable intermittently. Now they're immersed in mania and madness most of the time. And in recent days, the group of wolf cubs who were escorting them began to talk to themselves one after another." Hog said. Hearing this, Caesar could not help but be vigilant. He stretched out his originally curled-up body and asked, "What are they talking about?" "In the long years, in the eternal wait, even death will die." Hog did not hesitate and repeated the original words, "We will eventually return." After hearing this, Caesar tilted his head. The words were clear and logical. With the level of the battle lizard man and the gnome, it was impossible for them to say such things. Obviously, they were influenced by something else. That hidden existence dared to be so brazen and not afraid of attracting the attention of the gods? Or were these guys not afraid of the gods at all? Back then, Caesar did not personally touch this strange little statue. Instead, he found 2 scapegoats and used them to destroy the thing. Now, as time passed, the strange phenomenon gradually appeared. It seemed that the preparation 3 years ago was correct. Apart from the spirit, do they have any other signs? For example, increase in strength, drastic changes in the body, and so on. Caesar asked. Apart from the sudden whispers, the black dragon was not affected by anything else. It seemed that he himself was not affected. Hog thought for a moment and replied, "Not at the moment, Your Majesty." "That's enough." Caesar scratched the armor on his chest. "Use cages to keep these guys captive and throw them into the dungeon. Let the guards keep an eye on them. If there are any other abnormalities, inform me." To be honest, he was not interested in these things at all. The black dragon was evil to begin with. Why would he care about something even more evil? Chapter 183. A month later, Half-Lich Ryan's baptism ceremony was completed. Actually, if a living giant dragon bestowed a dragon bloodline, there would be no need to go through so much trouble. All they needed to do was to willingly extract the true blood and inject it into the recipient. However, that would cause the power and energy of the true dragon to drop. Thus, most true dragons would not give it to others casually. The stingy Pinochet dragons would never consider doing so. It was true that the blood of the dragons was rich in elemental magic, but not every drop of their blood was real blood. It was something that was hidden in the hearts and basal blood vessels of the dragons, slowly accumulating bit by bit as the dragons grew over a long period of time. In a sense, it could be considered the source of a true dragon's power. As the green dragon was already dead, it could not extract the blood on its own. Ryan had to extract it first. In the isolated area around the treetop fortress, the digging worms had dug out a large pit. Then, the pit was paved with steel that the goblins had hurriedly forged to form a blood pool. There were all kinds of creatures standing around, but it was silent. Only the crackling of bonfires could be heard. Ren had already taken off his pitch-black robe, revealing his grotesque body that was half human and half undead. He was already prepared. He only needed to wait for the true dragon's corpse to arrive before he could begin his first job after joining Blackwing's nest. The orc leader Gull, the jackal leader Hog, the wyvern leader Husky, the hound leader, and the manticore leader had all arrived. As the leaders of the main battle tribes, they were the lucky ones who had received the blessings of the Black Dragon Lord. The blessings of an old green dragon's dragon bloodline could greatly increase the power of these fellows. Furthermore, 2 large adult horsegate lizards were brought here. Even under the comforting of the wild boar men, they still let out uneasy growls from time to time. Caesar perched on the edge of the treetop fortress, quietly observing this scene. Speaking of which, he had a sudden idea to do the same for himself. He wondered if he could obtain some spellcasting abilities from the green dragon's dragon bloodline. However, after thinking about it for a while, Caesar gave up on this idea. Whether or not he could obtain the ability to cast spells was another matter. The level of the old green dragon's bloodline was not satisfactory for him. If there was a chance, Caesar could hunt even more powerful true dragons, such as ancient dragons, primordial dragons, and even ancestral true dragons. If his mind was broader, even the dragon god and dragon queen would have a chance in the future. If he really wanted to use this method to try and obtain the ability to cast spells, Caesar would of course choose the better dragon vein. The gates of the treetop fortress opened, and cold air surged out. The orc warriors pulled out pitch-black chains thicker than a human's waist, dragging out the green dragon's corpse that had been frozen and sealed. The huge ice sculpture had a great visual impact, and water stains were left behind wherever it passed. After 4 years, the old green dragon finally came in handy. After dragging the dragon's corpse to its designated position, the orc warriors took a deep breath and put down the chains on their shoulders. The heavy black chains fell to the ground with a dull sound of metal colliding, and it was the prelude to the extraction of the dragon's blood. The warriors of the Stone Crow clan spread out and joined the ranks of the other clans. They were on guard duty at the periphery of the fortress. The blazing fire continued to deliver high temperatures, and the ice sculpture that was exposed to the scorching heat melted faster. At the same time, the half-lich stretched out its skeletal right arm. The elements gathered and took shape. Under the gaze of all kinds of monsters, the wound on the green dragon's abdomen that had been frozen started to bleed again. It flowed through the trench below the dragon's corpse and into the deep pit that the Ankhegs had prepared. At the same time, the half-lich used its human arm to grab a small handful of magic powder beside it and scattered it into the pit. This was what it had mentioned before. It could condense the elemental power in the dragon's blood, and it would be helpful for its extraction later. The process was not complicated, but because of the large number of feet, it took almost half a day before the 20-meter-long green dragon's blood was completely drawn out. And after that, it was time for the main event. After adding in some supplementary ingredients, the Demolic started to retrace the blood that was drawn into the blood pool, extracting the true blood that could truly be used for the bloodline of the dragon. Under the influence of the elemental magic of the Demolic, in an instant, the wind howled and the spirits whimpered. The scene was slightly terrifying. During this time, the half-lich had absorbed the magic from the outside twice. It used necromancy magic to suck the life out of 2 horsegate lizards, turning the 2 huge livestock into useless skin and bones. After a long time, the extraction process was completed. During this time, countless pairs of eyes were constantly watching the half-lich, afraid that it would do something out of the ordinary, snatch the precious true blood, and escape. Caesar was not worried about this at all. He knew that the half-lich would not escape. Ryan was a smart guy, and he would not have any wild hopes. The reason why the Black Dragon Lord was here was purely to see how this ritual was carried out. Now, it seemed to be quite simple. This was purely a layman's theory. At this time, the blood in the dragon's blood pool that was originally bright had turned into a muddy, dark, and ordinary dragon's blood without any elemental magic. The half-lich that had been standing still finally moved. It walked to the side, its body was slightly bent, and its steps were unsteady. It seemed that it had consumed a lot of energy. Ryan came to a vessel made of pure silver and stretched out his left hand. The palm of his hand was turned over, and the powerful true blood surged and poured into it. Success, as you wish, your majesty. After completing this step, the Demolic, who had been silent all this time, finally opened its mouth. It raised its head and bowed towards the Black Dragon Overlord who was watching from above. Everything that follows will be led by you. I wonder who has the qualifications to receive your favor. Husky. The Black Dragon Lord spoke, and the first one was the Wyvern leader. For a dragon descendant, the dragon's veins were much more beneficial to them than other creatures. Letting this guy go first was not because Caesar favored these dragon descendants who had no loyalty, but because of the possible danger of this baptism. He needed a leader to go first and test its safety. Thank you for your grace, master. Saliva dripped from Husky's fangs. It used its wing joints to support itself on the ground and ran overexcitedly. It was the first to accept this gift and swallowed the true blood that was scooped up by the silver spoon. Immediately after, this 3.5-meter-long wyvern leader let out a suppressed growl. Small bumps appeared on its scaly skin, bulging and then quickly disappearing, as if they were flowing within its body. In the midst of the twin-legged flying dragon's sharp cry, its body began to rapidly expand. It grew from its original 5 meters to 4 meters, then 5 meters. In the end, it finally stopped growing when it reached 8 meters. In the assessment device in Caesar's pupils, the flying dragon leader's ability value jumped from the original 190 to 301 in an instant. This increase was huge. Hog, the Black Dragon Lord called the second name. Chapter 184. At the edge of the treetop fortress, the husky was still growling as his body continued to change. However, after confirming that the true blood of the dragon was not dangerous, Lord Black Dragon turned his gaze elsewhere and looked at the Knoll leader. Hog walked over. Just like before, Demolic Ryan used his skeletal arm to hold the silver spoon and scooped up the true blood of the dragon. When the Knoll bent over and opened his mouth, Hog took the silver spoon and did it himself. The general manager of Blackwing's Nest was always extremely vigilant against these outsiders. Furthermore, he was unwilling to bend his back in front of these lowly newcomers. Therefore, he snatched the large silver spoon and poured it into his mouth without caring about anything else. Caesar's guess was wrong. In fact, the effects of the dragon bloodline on non-dragon creatures were far greater than those of dragon descendants, especially those creatures that were far inferior to true dragons. As soon as the blood entered his mouth, Hog's entire body trembled. Under the attack of elemental magic and vitality, he soon began to cough continuously and painfully. This big fellow to the Knoll arched his back and spread his hind legs backward. His claws were pressed against the ground like an ordinary wolf, his front claws digging into the mud. Hog let out a low growl. Intense pain surged through him, penetrating deep into his bones and almost evaporating him. The true blood of the dragon rolled in his stomach, and the irritated sound constantly invaded the Knoll's brain. This was Sylvia's powerful will. Even if the mother of poison was dead, it was not something that a lowly species like the Knoll could casually covet. The trembling did not stop, and it only became more and more intense. Hog's skin cracked, like yellow earth that had been exposed to the sun for a long time. Deep grooves appeared, and bright red blood spurted out from the cracks, quickly dyeing the gnoll's grayish-brown body red. Something was sucking at his muscles and organs. The originally gifted gnoll leader was rapidly weakening. In this regard, the surrounding monsters were indifferent and remained silent. The Demolic was silent, and even Lord Black Dragon only watched calmly. Caesar could observe Hog's state of life, but he did not know what was happening in the depths of Hog's body. Hog let out one dry howl after another. This kind of pain was indescribable. The true blood of the dragon showed no mercy, as if it was sucking his life force dry, causing him to degenerate to the same level as an ordinary gnoll, or even weaker. In the distance, the Jackallan clansmen who were on patrol duty saw this scene and immediately let out excited gasps and low growls. Don't think that in the Jackallan clan, there would be meaningless emotions such as sympathy and worry. Once the old leader's strength was insufficient, he would definitely be eliminated. These greedy and cruel guys would immediately tear him apart and devour him, killing his own kind. They had been suppressed by Hog for too long, nearly 20 years. This time was quite long for the gnolls, who only had a lifespan of 35 years. Hog's clan had all died, but this old leader was still full of energy and incomparably powerful. While the gnolls could only obey him, they also maliciously cursed Hog's death, hoping to replace him as the leader. But at this time, this guy survived. Although his image was extremely miserable, he was reborn. His pale, red, and swollen eyes glowed. Hog's body was like a deflated balloon that was filled with air again. It began to swell and stretch. While returning to its original state, it began to expand further. Behind him, the mottled gray mane on his back that had gradually softened gradually turned black again. It was full of vitality and stood upright like hard steel needles. Hog's sharp teeth protruded out of his mouth. The thin and short claws that originally belonged to the gnolls gradually grew into slender shapes. The tips were still sharp, but with a bit of dragon-like color. Iradia's first dragon bloodline gnoll was born. It should be known that ordinary true dragons would never give the dragon bloodline to the lowly and dirty gnolls. Although it seemed that Hog had only become a little bigger than before, the actual internal changes were immeasurable. This gnoll leader was no longer a pure gnoll. The true blood of the dragon flowed in his body. Not only did his strength soar, but he also gained a long lifespan that was close to that of a true dragon. He was completely transformed into a long-lived species. It was a pity that the dragon bloodline bestowed by bestowment could not be passed on to the next generation. To create a new group of gnolls with the dragon bloodline spontaneously, a true dragon without any racial segregation would have to step in personally. Scan analysis result: carbon-based life. Comprehensive combat ability assessment: 240-270. Hog was originally a talented and abnormally powerful gnoll. This time, he ushered in a new round of breakthrough growth. Unfortunately, due to racial factors, as a lower-level creature, no matter how powerful the gnolls were, they could not be compared to species like the flying dragon and the canine demon descendant. Therefore, even if Hog suffered great pain and underwent exaggerated changes, his combat ability was still not as good as that of the Black Dragon Lord Husky. In fact, this was normal. The flying dragon leader had always been shrouded in the shadow of the Dragon King and did not have much of a presence. However, in terms of combat ability, he could be ranked in the top 3 of the Blackwing clan. Now that he had been bestowed with the dragon bloodline, even the corpse dragon Angramo was no match for Husky in a one-on-one fight. Next, Gaul and Olcash of the Stone Crow clan. As the most loyal clan to the Black Dragon Lord, the orcs received preferential treatment and special permission. 2 warriors from the clan were selected to be bestowed with the dragon bloodline. To be honest, Caesar was still hesitant about whether the orcs should participate in the dragon blood baptism. He went through a short period of consideration. The hesitation seemed unnecessary, but the Black Dragon Lord had his own considerations. After absorbing a large amount of knowledge, Caesar understood that the ancient orcs of the previous era were very powerful. At that time, the Orc Empire could continuously produce shamans, wizards, and even other legends. They could fight against demons, and dragons like the Empire where the sun never sets in the south. However, at the end of the Second Era, the ancient orcs suffered from a terrifying blood curse. Not only did their hair fall off and their skin turn from brown to green, but what was more terrifying was the shackles on their bodies. The upper limit of their talent seemed to be blocked by a shackle, and they were reduced to the miserable state of being in the same league as the gnolls and kobolds. Since then, the green orcs could no longer produce powerful shamans. It was extremely difficult for them to even step on the path of wizards. It was even more wishful thinking to enter the legendary realm. Caesar had such a vision. If he could find a way to let the orcs revert to their ancestors and turn them into existences like the ancient orcs, the strength provided by the dragon bloodline of an old green dragon might not even be as strong as the ancient orcs themselves. However, after thinking for a while, Caesar immediately gave up on this idea. In Iradia, countless remnants of the ancient Orc Empire were full of yearning to regain their former glory. They were looking for a way to escape from the hardships. There were also many powerful existences who wanted to increase the potential of the orcs and increase the strength of their followers. However, until now, more than 1,600 years had passed since the end of the Second Era. Until now, there had been no news of an especially powerful orc appearing anywhere. Countless pioneers had proven that this path was not feasible. Even if it was feasible, it would probably be something that only the gods could interfere in. It was not something that Caesar could consider at the moment. Hence, in the end, the two orc warriors were still recruited by Caesar to receive the dragon bloodline of the Mother of Poison. Oh, it would be best not to mention the Mother of Poison. The orcs' brains had reached a certain level. It could be seen from Gaul's reluctance to use Alec's thirst that they were unwilling to accept anything from their enemies. If it were not for Lord Black Dragon's strict orders, these fellows would not have come to this place at all. Even if they had come reluctantly, the two orcs' expressions were not good. Their faces were gloomy, and there was a dark red color in their green skin. Chapter 185. Ever since they got their revenge, the Stone Crow clan had become loyal to the Black Dragon. Even if he asked them to die, these beastmen would probably agree without hesitation. So even if they were unwilling, under the strict orders of the Black Dragon Lord, Gaul and Olcash went forward without hesitation and accepted the dragon's blood transformation, successfully obtaining the dragon's vein. After that, Gaul's strength increased to the same level as the Gnoll leader, while Olcash was slightly weaker. After all, he was born with a deficiency and reached the same level as the undead knights in the Underdark. What happened next was logical. Even the inferior gnolls had no problems accepting the dragon's blood baptism, so the other clan leaders naturally wouldn't be in danger. The Demon Hound leader and the Shadow Manticore leader received the dragon's vein one after another. At the same time, due to the extra portion of true dragon's blood, Caesar summoned the new leader of the Grey Horses. Ever since the incident in the Underdark, these fellows had been quite obedient until now. On the other hand, they were one of the main battle forces of the Blackwing clan's light cavalry. The heavy cavalry was led by the Stone Crow beastmen equipped with wolf mounts. Thus, the leader of the Grey Horses was fortunate enough to benefit from this gift. Before concluding, it was worth mentioning that among all the clan leaders that received the dragon's vein, the one that had the biggest change wasn't Hog or Era, but the Demon Hound leader Nero. It was a little unexpected. Before the undead army joined, the Demon Hound leader was the strongest force under the Black Dragon Lord. Now, this Demon Hound leader had some changes. Not only was it given the dragon's blood, its purgatory bloodline was also strengthened. This allowed its strength to increase by leaps and bounds, and it became the strongest in the Blackwing clan. Its ability assessment value reached 347, reaching the level where it could fight against the Demolic Ryan. This monster that had expanded to 10 meters and resembled a wolf or a dog was majestic, with a hint of a purgatory demon style. At the same time, Nero's innate ability as a demon hound was reset. This meant that it could use the devour living ability like a newborn demon hound, and its strength would increase by another level in the future. At this point, the Dragonblood baptism ceremony that could shock the entire Northern Lands had come to an end. The leaders of the main battle clans of the Blackwing clan had all received a huge boost in strength, showing a leap in their strength. With this, Caesar would no longer face the problem of not having a powerful subordinate for at least the next 30 years. Well done. The Trees Fortress, Treetop Fortress, he was very satisfied, but his tone, because he had to be in front of his subordinates, especially the newly joined Ryan and the Grey Horse clan that was ruled bloody terror. So he couldn't be nice. After saying that, Caesar turned around and crawled back into the Emerald Palace. Compared to the rapid development of the Blackwing lair, its neighbor, the Elven Forest, was peaceful. After all, the people living here were all long-lived species, and their power structure was relatively isolated. So, whether it was the leader or the ordinary people, their pace of life was much slower. In the southeast of the Elven Lake, there was a hill formed due to geological changes. Although it wasn't high, the scenery was beautiful. Standing at the top, one could see the lake that was as quiet as a mirror. Garcia Whisperwind was standing there and looking down. There was no one beside her. The light of dusk with the color of cheese spread out from above and landed on the entire Lake of the Elves, making it look like a vast starry sky, full of radiance. This scene was very beautiful. Of course, it was the same for humans. A month ago, when he first met the Elven King, the Black Dragon couldn't help but admit that he was infatuated. After all, dragons had a unique sense of beauty toward all living creatures, and Caesar, who was a human in his previous life, had a better impression of such beautiful human-like creatures. And Queen Whisperwind just so happened to satisfy all the fantasies of human-like creatures of the opposite sex. In fact, the so-called Dragon King was still a young dragon, but because of the many times he took drugs, Caesar's development speed was much faster than other true dragons, and his body was mature and well-rounded. And at this time, the overflowing desire of dragons to mate gradually began to invade Caesar's brain. Iradia's most common saying was, "Nature is not to be taken away." So, the little black cub that hid in the mud to catch fish back then was now beginning to have uncontrollable sexual urges. In short, Caesar had entered the long, estrus period of dragons. But this was very normal, and it wasn't something that the Black Dragon was afraid of. What really frightened Caesar was that he could really appreciate the beauty of the gnolls and orcs and savor the elegance of the wyverns. He even knew how to distinguish which Manticore was more beautiful when faced with the extremely ugly and twisted Shadow Manticore. He was really in despair. In fact, there was a reason why true dragons had such desires. Dragons were the most famous creatures in the multiverse, and their hidden strength was that they had no reproductive isolation with any other creatures. Any creature, including demons, angels, and even gods. This allowed them to create more dragon-descendant creatures and strengthen their own power. So true dragons like to have promiscuous relationships, regardless of whether they were good or evil. Caesar actually didn't reject the boiling desire of dragons to mate. After all, he had been a dragon for so long, and he had a good understanding of his own body. But even if he wanted to mate, the other party should at least be a beautiful dragon, like a silver dragon or a gem dragon, or some good-looking human-like creature. It was amazing that he could be an estrus with pigs, dogs, horses, sheep, and cows. Fortunately, the Black Dragon Lord had an autonomous control unit that could adjust his emotions and suppress his body. Otherwise, he didn't know what would happen. Let's wait until this little guy reaches adulthood. Back to the main topic. During this period, the Elf King Garcia only did one thing, and that was to ask the little fairy for information about the Dragon Lord next door. Garcia still remembered the situation on the day of the visit. She could see that Luna and the Black Dragon had a close relationship, and they had a deep understanding of each other. So, Garcia felt that she could try to see the full picture of the powerful black dragon from the little fairy. It had to be said that Garcia's self-cultivation as a leader was much higher than the black dragon. She had a gentle temperament and treated people well. At the same time, she was able to abide by tradition and stick to her bottom line. Even if one were to nitpick, it would be difficult to find any flaws in her. She could be said to be the model of Iradia's kind leader. In addition, Luna had a simple personality and treated her own kind in the elven forest as a trustworthy friend. Therefore, Garcia quickly won her trust, and their relationship quickly warmed up and became very close. Logically speaking, what happened next should be very easy. However, Garcia encountered a setback. Every time she mentioned the Black Dragon Lord situation or the Blackwing's nest, regardless of whether it was a secret or not, Luna would pick up a small cup and sip on the moonflower dew. She would puff her cheeks and shut her mouth, not saying a word. At the same time, she would return an innocent look. It was the same every time. Well, the pure forest fairy had learned bad things, Garcia thought helplessly. This time, not only did she lose the moonflower dew, but she also didn't get anything she wanted to know. Emperor Yufeng could only give up. She didn't really fuss over it or do anything out of line. She didn't befriend Luna purely to achieve her goals. At the same time, she was sincere. Therefore, even if she didn't get any information, Garcia wouldn't change her attitude towards the little guy. She would be as gentle and close as ever. Of course, this was under the premise that Luna didn't endanger the elven forest. Chapter 186. No, my child. I will never allow you to put yourself in danger again and stay in that place. When Luna had asked her parents to go to Blackwing's nest, she had unexpectedly been sternly rejected by her father. When T-Rope said this, he looked at her with a worried expression that he had never shown before. His eyes were hazy and his tone was full of doubt. Hearing the conversation between the father and daughter, her mother Bailon Wei also came over and took her hand. She said in a gentle but unusually heavy voice, "Yes, regarding this point, I also agree with your father's decision." "How can this be?" Luna stood quietly by the window, looking at her parents' resolute faces. The two pairs of transparent wings on her back trembled, and the cold wind whistled past her body, making the little fellow look weak and small. "You clearly agreed not to interfere with my freedom. If I want to go back, I can do so at any time. Sorry, we lied to you. We only wanted to save you from the powerful evil dragon's claws." T-Rope admitted to this point honestly. He then sighed and said, "What you don't know is that the entire elven forest was preparing for war because of you. Child, we can't let our mistakes cause others to bleed. Father has made a mistake once, and now he is tormented every day. He is deeply remorseful and will never make the same mistake a second time. I don't need to be saved. I stayed there of my own accord," Luna said angrily. This was the first time in her life that she had such a fierce argument with her parents. "Caesar promised me that if I want to go home, I could do so at any time. The evil dragon you speak of has never lied to me. But father, mother, you said the same thing, and now you refuse to honor it." Although the little fellow was simple, she was not stupid. Therefore, before she was taken away from Blackwing's nest, she had made a promise with her parents and even Garcia Whisperwind. After they promised not to restrict her freedom, and after ensuring that there were no problems, Luna ran to say goodbye to Caesar. She did not expect him to go back on their word. "Please forgive us." T-Rope sincerely apologized to her, but even so, he still insisted on his decision as a father. "You're still young, and you lack the ability to distinguish right from wrong. You don't know what's good and what's bad, so you're willing to get close to an evil Pinochet dragon. It's our fault. We indulged you too much." Her mother, Bailon Wei, added with a gentle expression, "When you grow up, you will naturally understand." "I don't want to understand," Luna argued. Whether it's Caleb, Magus Hill, or Her Majesty Wind Whisper, they all think that Caesar is different from the other chromatic dragons. As a black dragon, he hasn't done anything harmful to the elven forest. No matter how different he is, The chromatic dragons are all extremely selfish and cruel evil dragons. They burn, kill, rob, and do all kinds of evil. Child, I know that you may have a different opinion on this, but you have to know that it's hard to change one's nature. Bailanwei warned, our race suffered the calamity of the humans and green dragon, which is why we fell into such a pitiful state. We have no choice but to rely on the protection of others and hide in the elven forest to survive. Have you forgotten the teachings of our ancestors? I haven't forgotten. Luna kept shaking her head. Her voice did not sound like she was crying, but tears fell from her eyes. But Caesar is really different. He treats me very well. In order to protect me, he was even willing to become the enemy of the great green dragon, the mother of poison. Then we should be even more vigilant. Bailanwei was not only unmoved after hearing this, but she also nodded with a serious expression. The Dragon King is even stronger than the mother of poison. This means that the black dragon is even more vicious than the green dragon. Caesar is not that kind of pinochet dragon at all. No, you only know it in your eyes. Bailanwei said and continued to reason with Luna. You can't see the full picture of the black dragon at all. She thought of the cruel appearance of the black dragon that was as huge as a mountain and had to think of a way to make her daughter see the truth. Her Majesty Yufeng has already investigated. The Dragon King is notorious in the northern kingdoms. Child, if it is really as good as you say, where did this cruel reputation come from? Luna could not refute. She turned her face away bitterly and hid under the window of the treehouse. She stood where she was and looked at the darkness outside the house. Perhaps she was staring at the moonlight and stars, or perhaps she was observing the nocturnal species in her home. At this moment, Tierope finally understood her daughter's feelings for the dragon. However, the father did not say out loud. He only consoled her by saying, Child, if you really like to stay by the dragon's side, we won't object. When you become an adult, you can meet Her Majesty Yufeng and ask her to introduce you to a kind metal dragon. Even a neutral gem dragon would not be a problem. As he said that, he suddenly changed the topic and sternly warned again. But the pinochet dragon, absolutely not. No, Luna was originally sobbing silently, but halfway through, she suddenly murmured something that sounded like a sigh. Immediately, she became nervous. No, you can't do this. A layer of goosebumps appeared on her skin, and her whole body was cold. She said in a panic, You don't understand. If I don't go back for a long time, Caesar will come looking for me. No one knew better than Luna how terrifying the great black dragon was now. Whenever the Dragon King was in a bad mood, the draconic aura that spread out was enough to make the monsters of the Blackwing clan uneasy. And when he was angry, the entire Blackwing nest would tremble. It's you who don't understand. How can the pinochet dragon keep thinking about this kind of thing? Tierope was amused by her. Her daughter was so silly that it was cute. If you don't appear in front of it for a long time, the pinochet dragon will only be puzzled for half a second at most. Very soon, it will forget about it. Don't you know the nature of the pinochet dragon? These greedy and lazy fellows don't even care about their own parents and clans. My silly daughter, you think too highly of yourself. Since ancient times, these young children always thought that they were the center of attention of Iradia. Even the gods would revolve around them. Little did they know that the world would not stop moving for anyone, just like how the pinochet dragon would not change its nature for anyone. For thousands of years, among the pinochet dragons in the boundless world and the multiverse, there were countless freaks. Those outstanding dragon-type abnormalities left their true names in the long river of history. They were extremely strange and powerful. But if you really opened up their history and studied their nature, you would realize that these pinochet dragons were all the same. Until now, there had not been a single good dragon in this clan. At this point, there was no way to continue the conversation. Luna's eyes widened as she looked at her parents. She felt like she was facing two strangers. The warmth she had in the past was gone at this moment. Was she affected by the evil dragon, or were her parents wearing a mask of indifference? Luna did not know. It seemed that no matter how hard she tried, her parents would not relent. The fairy girl could only give up and go to the elven lake where the leader resided, seeking help from Kasia Whisperwind. Unfortunately, although Kasia was a reasonable person, there was nothing he could do. She told the little fairy, "I'm sorry, Luna. This is a joint decision of your parents. Before the forest fairy reaches the age of 35, you should follow your parents' teachings and guardianship. They have not harmed you, so even I cannot interfere." You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.